So this is kind of a two-part presentation. There's kind of a couple pieces here. We're going to talk about fundraising sort of generally, and the sort of tips I can offer you are primarily going to be around kind of, again, like Silicon Valley style, high-tech, high-growth companies, but not every company is like that. So definitely evaluate whether this advice makes sense for your business. The other thing I'm going to do is go through a series of, I've kind of identified like 12 different types of pitches you can make for your business. And so we're going to do some interactivity. I want you to start thinking now, because we're going to be using this throughout the presentation, is that if you have a startup or you have a startup idea, start by thinking about that. And how you present that, how do you pitch that? And a pitch can be one to explain to somebody, right? There's the elevator pitch, right? People say the word elevator pitch a lot, and there's the elevator pitch that you might make for somebody when you are explaining to them, like, what does your thing do, right? But then there's the startup pitch the elevator pitch that's for the investor, right? And I think they're slightly different. And sometimes people get confused and they use one when they really need to be using the other. And if you don't work at a startup, then I want you to think about the company you work for today. And I want you to think about it as if you were the owner of that company and you were planning to fundraise for that company because you're going to grow the business somehow, right? So start thinking about your own company. How would you describe it? What that company does? Why is it valuable? If you don't think it, what are the products that it makes? Like, who are the customers? Like, how do you make money? If you don't know those things, you should probably start to figure out what those things are for your business, right? If you want to start your own company, you need to understand. You need to be able to start to figure out how all kinds of companies work. And two, if you don't, if you're not excited about what your company does, why are you working there? But I want you to think about that through the lens, because we're going to go through all the different pitch archetypes, and then I want you to think about, and we're going to practice pitching it through one of those archetypes. Cool. So before we get started, again, some audience interaction here. I want you guys to just shout out the things that you think are important, that investors care about when you're pitching them about your startup. Like, what are the things that investors want to know, or what do they care about? What do they think is important? ROI. So how much money are they going to make from this? Okay, but so how do they figure out whether or not you're going to give them a high ROI? They want to know about your team. Who is building this thing, this company? What else? What? Sustainability of the financial is that what you mean? Financial sustainability? Can the business be successful in the long run? Yeah. What else? Oh, what? Potential market. Like, who are you addressing? How big is it? Is it growing? What's going on? Who are these customers? The plan? Trends? Trams? Trends. Sorry. The trends. So, like, exactly. So it's not just like, what is the market now, but how is the market changing, right? What else? What? The growth of the market. What do you? How big do you think this market will become in the future? Yeah, so the team and, what are their qualifications, what is their experience, why are they the right people? The idea. Yeah, what is it, the product, right? What are you actually making? And how does it work, right? Yeah, who are you going up against? Who do you have to beat, all right? Or who else is trying to do this? Revenue, yeah. Maybe you make something people want, but where's the money going to come from, right? Or, how are you going to generate revenue from what you're doing? The customer need, the customer challenge, right? What is that core thing that why is this important? Why do people care about this? Why do people need this? How are you going to reach the people, right? You've got your market, you've got your product. How are you going to make sure that these people know about this thing so that they can buy it, right? Sometimes you've got a thing that you know people can use, but you don't know necessarily how to get in front of them. So that's always a challenge. So I think you guys are right on the money, right? There's a lot of things here that you guys are talking about, the product, the team's ability to execute. I think one thing that no one quite touched on was traction, or like, what is the success that you're experiencing right now? What is the growth? This is not like a exhaustive list by any means, but it's a set of things, the customer demand. How do you know that this is something people want or need? Paul Graham talks a lot about what makes for a great founder, and he's used like sort of two terms. The first is relentlessly resourceful. So he describes that as somebody who is flexible enough to kind of adapt and change what they're doing, change their approach, change their ideas, but also who is, has the sort of perseverance and the endurance to kind of keep pushing despite all the obstacles, despite all the challenges, and that great founders exude relentless resourcefulness. So they demonstrate relentless resourcefulness because that's what it takes to be successful. The other phrase that he's used is formidable, which basically means like, do I feel like these people are just going to get it done, right? And that's like a feeling, that's an emotion. And I think one of the things that is surprising is just how emotional investors are. Even the smartest investors in the world, the people who are like very measured, we're an emotional species, and they can't help but be emotional and get feelings when they are talking to you. Maybe they feel like they relate to you in some way, you share something of your background, or they're afraid that if they don't invest in you. Honestly, that was one of the big things that they talk about is FOMO, fear of missing out. Investors aren't trying to, don't invest in you necessarily. They know that a lot of these companies won't succeed, but they don't want to miss the next Google, the next Uber, the next Airbnb. They don't want to be that person who saw it, thought about it, and was like, no, because then it looks worse, right? If your investment company doesn't succeed, hey, it happens all the time, right? But if you don't invest in a company that does become successful, then you're like, man, I could have been, you feel really bad, and you're going to feel really bad for a really long time because that company's going to keep going. So we're going to touch a little bit more on this, but I'd like to start by having you turn to a neighbor, and we're going to take turns, and we're going to give you each 1 minute. So the elevator pitches are 30 seconds, so you're going to get 1 minute. First of all, pick a partner, look around you, get a neighbor. Do you have a neighbor? Do you know who you're going to be talking to? Does everyone know? Look at the person. Yeah, you got to see somebody. And now you got to pick. You're going to rock, paper, scissors. Go ahead and do it, and get your rock, paper, scissors on. Rock, paper, scissors for who goes first. Whoever wins goes first. Do you guys know how this works? Rocks, paper, scissors. All right. And we're going to give you 1 minute, and you're going to pitch your business, the company you work for, or the startup idea that you're thinking about to the other person. 1, 2, 3, go. Hey, guys. Hey, let's try to bring it back. What I'm going to do now is call on people and have them explain the other person's idea to the group. So hopefully you're paying attention, and as the savvy investor, you are now going to the rest of your partners and you're saying, listen, I just heard from this hot startup. They're so great. And then their partners are saying, okay, what's so great about this company? Tell me about this company. And now you're telling them about the company. So raise your hand if you can pitch your partner's startup, and I want to hear how you pitch it. We got the mic. Come on, somebody's got to be good for this.
Come on, guys. Anyone, or we'll pick at random, put you in the spot.
He'll do it.
Okay. So you'll be pitching whose idea?
Yeah, give him a hand.
All
give him a hand.
right.
So you're pitching. Yeah. So you're going to pitch her company.
Okay.
All right, here we go.
Go.
Hi, so her company works with big brands who want to donate to charity, but they've come up with a really interesting way of doing it. What they do is they start a charity campaign in which I can invite my friends, and as I reach out to more people, they help the company, the brand, kind of donate as much money as the buzz generated in accordance with the campaign. So that's the basic, in essence, that's what the idea is. And again, now like they can tell me whether I.
Great. What do you think? Was that about right? Is that about how?
Or did I create something new?
Yeah, I mean, because it's kind of complicated. Like from his way, he will see it from corporate side where they want to do good and help the charity. But there might be some other views on this product where some people might see it as a advertising platform, which is, it's going to take more than 30 seconds.
I hear you. Well, let's give him a round of applause. Thank you. Any other takers? All right, we're gonna try this again later. So this is not over. But I think pitching is really interesting. One, obviously, it's hard to do it in a short period of time. But at the same time, 90 seconds is enough time to convey some information. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna switch it over and I'm gonna show you me. So you can put me on the spot. You can judge me. And as I pitch Ride Joy, and this was like at YC. This was like the warm up. So this was like us doing it to other founders, but it wasn't to investors. But it is basically the pitch that we did at Demo Day to hundreds of investors. So here we go. RideJoy is a community marketplace for rides. If you're going on a trip, you can list extra seat space in your car. And if you need to get somewhere, you can find a ride using our site. Now, you may not think people rideshare, but it's happening now on Craigslist. Actually, last year, there were over 50,000 posts in just the Bay Area. People are getting in cars with strangers they've never met on a site with no trust built in. We're doing rideshare right by adding payments, reputation, and a great user experience. To start off, we put up Burning Man rides. People loved it. In just 3 weeks, with no ads and no press, we got 750 rides listed and over 100 grand in seat inventory. But what kind of people rideshare, right? Maybe this is just some crazy San Francisco hipster thing. It's not. This is Michael. He's a former director at Merrill Lynch, and he posted 2 plane rides on our site. It just got filled up. And it's not just old guys with planes either. Our users, on average, are about 36 years old and about half women. Just like in Craigslist, there's about as many people asking for rides as requesting them. So it's an equal marketplace. You know, nobody thought that people would buy from strangers on eBay or rent out their extra rooms to strangers on Airbnb. But they did. Turns out these were giant markets hiding in plain sight. We're starting with SF to LA, a route that millions travel each year, and then building from there. We have the opportunity to do to Greyhound and Southwest what Airbnb did to hotels. My co-founders and I have been friends for a long time, and we've all worked at startups. But honestly, the real reason why we're going to be successful is because we specialize in winning. So RideJoy. We're going after a giant market, and we know our distribution strategy. If you are interested in the next great marketplace, or you just need a ride to SF after this, come talk to us. So again, Paul Graham's feedback on that pitch was charming, but not convincing. But I think at the end of the day, it got the message through. I think there were like if I were to break down how we did that pitch, step one was, okay, it's a pretty simple idea, like how people share rides, right? The real questions are, really, are there a lot of people who do this? And the answer is yes, there are 2 billion rides, 2 billion rides a year. We have traction, look at this chart. That $100,000 was kind of a crazy number where we basically calculated how much people were selling like trips to Burning Man, and when it's like $100 a trip, and if you see that many trips posted, then it was like $100 times like 700 rides, so it's like, or whatever, it's like 1,000 rides, there's $100,000 in seat inventory. But we had this nice chart. The next concern that people have is like, oh, it's just like weird old, like weird young people, like hippies, or like young people, or like weird people who do ride sharing. And we tried to alleviate that concern, and we said, they're half women. There's like drivers and passengers, so it's a dual-sided, and it's like a little bit older, right? So it's like more people that we can target, right? And then same with that rich guy, like planes scenario, right? It's like that's not the person you would expect to be sharing rides. This guy who's so, super successful, but that's sort of the opportunity. And then it was the FOMO, like layer on the FOMO, right? It was like eBay. When you think about it, before eBay got started, it was like, oh, you're gonna buy something from somebody else that you've never met before, and you're gonna like send them money, and then they're gonna send you stuff. Like, how is this ever gonna work, right? And obviously eBay is a very, very large and successful company. Airbnb, same thing. Like, even you're gonna let someone stay in your house. You're gonna be sleeping. They're gonna be sleeping in the room next to you. You don't even know who that person is. Like, what are you doing, right? And Airbnb services like 300,000 people every single night, right? Like, it's crazy. But again, that we sort of played that up. Like, you might think this is weird, but you thought those other things were weird too, and look at them now. They're huge companies. Don't make the same mistake again, right? We play that up, right, for effect. But that's the point, is that we've got traction, we've got a plan, and this is really big. And even though you're feeling weird, we actually flipped it on its head. You might be feeling weird about it, but maybe you feeling weird about it is the sign that actually it's the right thing, right? So I think pitches are really important, and they have like a very specialized sort of angle. I think when I was hearing people describe some of the pitches, and when I've asked people to talk about their business, they mainly describe the product, right? And I think that makes sense. But when you're an investor, you care less about the product, and you care more about like why, like who wants this, why do they want it, and like, it's like how are you going to make money is important, but the question is, money is simply a representation of something that people value. So what I really want to know is like, what do people need, and how are you fulfilling that? The product is fulfilling the need, but I need to understand the need, right? So when you look at it, this is my example of like the standard pitch. The standard pitch is like you've identified some kind of problem, and like there are people who need it, and like your pitch sounds like, there are 100 million, there are 10 million bakers in the United States, and bakers spend 2 hours preparing their yeast, and we have a machine that makes yeast preparation go down by like a factor of 10, and so now it's like it only takes 10% as much time, and that'll allow them to do these other things. And 9 out of 10 people that we showed a survey to said they would use this, and it costs like $100, and $100 times like let's say we get half the bakers in the world, that's $50 million a year or whatever, and that's our business, right? So it's very like straightforward, like there's a problem, we have a solution, and here's how we're gonna make it, right? And that's like, and I know this is like, it's a short amount of time, but I think you always need to think about like, when you're doing your pitch, if it's to somebody who's not going to be a user, you've got to explain the market need and like why this is a problem. But this is the standard pitch, and investors hear it all the time, and we got to go beyond that. We got to do something bigger and better. I don't want to say bigger, but just better. And so I'm going to walk us through like 11 different types of pitches, and we're going to talk through, and we're going to think about the business that you're thinking about starting, or maybe you've heard somebody else's business, and think about like which one of these makes the most sense that you might want to use, because different ones work for different places. So the first type of pitch is traction. You've got something that people are using really quickly, right? This is like basically the best one, right? I don't want to say it's the best one, but if you have something that lots and lots of people are using, like investors almost don't care about anything else. Like it's growing really quickly. People obviously want it. Like even if they don't understand it, they need to like hear more, and so like if you've got really great traction, you want to lead with that. So it sounds like, our apps downloads have gone through the roof. We've made this like viral game. It's like Flappy Bird, right? Like Flappy Bird could have raised so much money. What's your competitive advantage? What's the market you're addressing? Nobody cares. Like the investor sees this chart that looks like this. End of story, right? Flappy Bird could have raised a lot of money, right? But that's the point, that if you have traction, that sort of like answers any like doubt that might happen, unless it's like, maybe it's like a legal doubt. But even legal doubts can be addressed, right? Like look at how Uber and Airbnb are like lobbying to change the law, right? Because they have that kind of traction. So the first one, traction, pretty straightforward. Next one is X for Y, right? And so you hear this a lot, and sometimes people make jokes about it because it can be overused, because it's very simple to be like, we're Tinder for dogs, we're like Uber for fried chicken, like it's just easy to say something and say something else, right? But I think what really matters is that you've got X for Y. So X is about taking some like you've got a new customer segment or a new type of market or like a new type of product, and the Y that you have is a proven model. The X is the proven model, and then the Y is the new market, right? So I know that one of the companies that went through YC was a company called Mino Monsters, and they were so their pitch was essentially, the guy got on stage and he said, Pokemon is a $16 billion franchise for Nintendo. And Nintendo is never going to make iPhone or Android versions of Pokemon. So we are building Pokemon for mobile, right? And then it was like, here's a chart of our user growth, which was good. And it was like, that was their whole pitch, right? The end. Like, because the answer is like Pokemon it's obviously very powerful and very successful, and they were making a game that involved monsters and like fighting and battle, and it was true that Pokemon was never going to be on the iPhone because they've got their like proprietary like hardware that they're trying to sell, so they're always trying to sell on Game Boy or whatever, so they were never going to go to iPhone, and obviously that was the growing market, so that's where it makes sense. It makes sense to do X for Y, right? So I have these three elements here for a strong X to Y pitch. First, X is something that everyone has to agree is successful. You don't want to pick a company that's like still trying to make it, because if they're still trying to, you're like, okay, you already started on like a bad note of like this. We're going to be this sort of successful company, but for something else, like already bad. The second is it has to make sense for like why the new X is related to the Y. So like eBay for passwords doesn't really make sense, I guess, unless you were like selling other users' passwords or something. Or like Foursquare for like kids. Like it doesn't, you could just use regular Foursquare, or like, there's no real reason why you necessarily need. I know that someone did like a Stripe for kids, which was like payment for kids, and it involved like, ask your mom to buy this for you, and then they would get their mom would get the email, like, and so they could integrate it so that the kids could like request to buy things through this like button. So like that's an interesting angle, right? So and your why has to be like really compelling. You can't just be like, okay, this thing is successful and we're going to do it for something else, and this something else is like 1,000 people. Like it has to be a big market still. So a personal story, right? Personal story is one that comes up a lot too. You often see this on TV. You see this in like magazines. People will always say like, you know, I was just making something for myself, and it turns out it was like everybody wanted it. And you know, there's some truth to this. There's some truth to the idea that you know, what you need, what you really believe is valuable and important, there are at least some other people out there who need it, right? Like, you often, like, read, you know, like, lots of people have had the same problems, and yet those problems aren't solved. So if you feel like there are problems in your life or in your business, they could be good startup ideas. And sometimes it makes sense to pitch that for your startup, right? So, like, Drew Houston would talk about that. He would say, you know, Dropbox started because he got on a bus and he realized that he had left his, like, you know, he was getting like a master's or something at MIT, or he was studying at MIT, and he had some work he needed to get done, but it was on a USB stick, and he left the USB stick at home, and now he's on the bus, and he was like, why can't, like, my computer at home sync with my computer, you know, at the lab or whatever? And, like, on that bus, he started writing the code for Dropbox, right? And it's like that pain, and that every one of us, now we don't feel that pain anymore because all our stuff is synced on Dropbox, or it's synced through some other service. And like, yeah, so that works sometimes, but I mean, investors don't necessarily care about your specific problems. So this is just like a hook. This has to only be a hook to like a bigger story, right? Like what I'm talking about with these archetypes, they're not like the full pitch. They're just like the way that you like lead into this story, right? So when you're like, tell me about your business, you're gonna be like, well, the reason why my business got started is because like 2 years ago I had this thing, and then you tell the story, but then that story sort of sets them in the right frame so that they can listen to the rest of your pitch, you know? There's the pivot and then there's the offshoot. These are sort of like related ideas, so I put them in one category. So both of these are like you were doing one thing and then you realized something else, and now you're doing this something else. So in the pivot, it was like, okay, so the pivot, for if we were talking about RideJoy now, I was trying to describe a pivot to you, I'd say something like, you know, we started out by building this like network for long distance ride sharing, and we were like doing pretty well, but what we noticed is that there were like a small section of the users who were like totally using it just for commutes. They were like, they weren't doing long distance at all, which is what our goal was, but they were using it for commutes, and they were messaging it, and they like had set up this whole little system and whatever, and we realized that the real market was the commuters. The commuters are the ones who were like really, you know, needed this, and so now we've focused 100% on commuters, and that's what we're doing. We're doing this thing for commuters, right? So that's like one version of it. Another version of it is to say something like, you know, at my last job, me and so worked together, and we were doing this big project, and we couldn't find any software that like did X, or like any vendor that did Y, and we had to do it ourselves, and we had to like hack together this whole system. And then we realized that if we had this problem, there were probably other people who had this problem too. And so now we're building this thing that like integrates whatever, and does it for all these companies in this way, right? So that's where like it's nice to be able to say like there was a real situation where this was happening either in your own business or at the business you worked for or whatever it is, right? Like Gary Tan would often tell, like when we were in that brainstorming stage, like Gary Tan, who was one of the partners at YC, would just say to us, like, you know, like, you don't have any ideas, just go to the YC founders and ask them what their problems are. They probably have lots of problems. Just make one of those things, you know, like fix one of their problems, and now you have a business, right? And you know, like that's one way to look at the world, right? Is to be like, there are millions of problems out there, and you just need to find one to solve. It is big in Europe. So how are we going to get in, right? Like, what's our plan, right? Like, you know, the next step is like, what is any reason that you have for believing that you can be successful in this market? So yeah, pitch, pivot, and offshoots are interesting ones. So the next one is evolution next. So this is like it's like a history lesson, right? Where you walk the investor through how this market has evolved over time, and like why what you're making is going to be like the next best thing, right? And so again, that's what we did with like Airbnb, with RideJoy to some degree. We were like, you look at the marketplaces over time, they get more and more personal, right? The first marketplace was for stuff, and it was just transactional, and then Airbnb came along, and yeah, you're still like, you're in their house, but sometimes they're not there, or you're in a different room, and now we're like getting into that point where you're sharing in the same car, it's much closer, right? But this is the natural progression of evolution of a system, right? Or you're talking about how like software, it started in these mainframe things, and then it was in these like computers on your desk, and then it was in your phone, and the next thing is going to be the watch, or the like wearables makes a lot of sense, because when you look at that progression, like it's naturally going to get closer to your body, more connected to you. Maybe it's not the Apple Watch, maybe it's not Google Glass, but it's going to be something, right? And so that's sort of like where you put, like it has to go somewhere, right? Where's it going to go? And you tell that story to make this. And so to make this work, you got to talk about like big trends that the investor knows are happening, right? Where it's like, right? If it was online dating, it's like, 20 years ago, online dating not really a thing. Like in 2012 or something, 1 in 7 marriages were from people who met online, right? When you add up all the other ways you could meet somebody, like work or the bar or like whatever, like, it's a pretty big section, right? And so anyway, so that's the evolution next. And so if this is the counterpart to that, owning, like painting the future. So evolution next is sort of like, first it was this, then it was this, then it was this, and that's kind of like gap. It's like, this is the next thing, right? The alternative is to go like way into the future, right? To go way into the future. And so there was a company in our batch, not in our batch, but maybe like a batch after us, called HelloFax, and they were building like, document, like signing and sharing, and it was about like sort of getting rid of like paper documents, right? I think that's part of it's digital. Like we've talked about the paperless office for a long time, but it, sort of the idea is like it's gonna happen. There's still lots of paper in a lot of offices, but like eventually it will go away, right? And so the story is something like, isn't it amazing that we use so much paper, right? Like in 10, 15 years, like no one's gonna use any paper. Like we're just going to have all digital offices. But how does that work? How do we get to the place where we have digital offices? Well, one of the key problems we need to solve is signatures and signing, because signing still happens on pens and papers, and like that's one of those things where you still need the ink. And so what we've developed is this like technology where it makes it really, really easy to exchange signed documents, and that's step one to building out this like full paperless office, right? So you start with the future. Hopefully, you paint a future that like people like you're like, yeah, duh, like no paper. Like why would someday we'll just get rid of paper, and then just sort of walk through how your thing is like the first step in that direction. I mean, Get Around will talk about, and Uber will tell you this, is that they believe, and Google believes in like driverless cars, right? Like automated car driving. Like in 20, 25 years, maybe even less, people won't be driving that much anymore. Cars are going to have built-in technology, and so Uber will allow you to, will sort of hopefully be that built-in like technology that like the car just comes to you, right? They'll tell you that's what they're doing. It's kind of crazy future, but it is sort of what a lot of really smart people believe is going to happen. So the next one is service at scale. And so the idea here is that you're doing something that used to be done by people, and you are doing it with technology, with software. This is like both the good and bad thing about technology, right? Is that sometimes what we're allowing people to do is things that it's like it's like wasn't possible, right? But oftentimes what we're doing is taking something that used to be really difficult and making it easier, which sometimes eliminates the tasks for the people who used to be doing that thing, right? And sometimes that's good because they can now free them up to do other things, but sometimes it means that, they just don't have, like, we have these robots in manufacturing facilities now, and we just have less people who, like, turn screws, right? At Percolate, we have this challenge, right? We talk about, Percolate, the company that I work for now, we build tools that help marketing teams plan and collaborate and, create and publish their content. And one of the things that is scary is that agencies, most of the brands, the marketing teams that we sell to, they usually work with an ad agency or PR agency that does a lot of this creation stuff. And their fears were going to eliminate their jobs. And what our line is to say something like, we believe in creative work, we believe that it's important for people to come up, marketing's never going to like replace like the creative insight. But it is also taking out some of their business, right? Because this is why, for instance, lawyers are really bad at adopting new technologies, why it's hard to sell into the legal industry, because they bill by the hour, right? And so anything that saves them time costs them money in the long run, because it means that they can't bill somebody, instead of like looking stuff up like really quickly, they do some sort of like arduous search process and they charge you more, right? So it's kind of a crazy system. But service at scale is basically saying like, my friend Jessica Ma runs a company called In and Arrow, and she says, look, every small business has to have an accountant, either part-time accountant or like, you hire 10 hours a week or you share with somebody else. And there's all these little things they have to do, file papers, like integrate all this stuff, like print out forms, do all this stuff. And our software does 90% of that. And it does it at 10% the cost, right? That's a real value add to a business, and that clearly means that they'd be willing to pay for that product, and therefore, this business can be successful. How's the pace here? Are we going around a good pace? Yeah? Okay. So next one, wouldn't it be cool with? So moving away from human like replacing people, this is more like, wouldn't it be cool with if we could do this thing, right? And so I think the way Travis Kalanick, who's the founder of and CEO of Uber, likes to describe it, he says, Uber was like a joke for me and my closest 50 friends so that we could all have black car service whenever we wanted, right? Who knows if that's true, but that's his pitch, is being like, wouldn't it be cool if I could just press a button and a black car just shows up and I could like go to where I wanted to go, right? Like, that's like an interesting pitch. I think it's like a little bit of a dangerous pitch, because then you're just kind of describing, like, you don't want to get too into the cool factor in it. Like, it's a starting point, it's a starting conversation, and like like novelty is interesting, but it can't be a novelty forever, right? Like Twitter in 2006 was kind of like, wouldn't it be cool if you could broadcast your thoughts to the whole world, or like just like send some messages out that are really short. And like Twitter was kind of like a joke for a really long time. But now it's a global network. It's literally like how they predict earthquakes, right? Like, you can see the earthquake coming as people like tweet in different regions, right? Like, it's amazing because it has built out. But one to be cool with is one way that you can start a pitch conversation. Insane technology. So insane technology is about sort of like enabling the magical to happen, right? I think this is perhaps the most, stereotypical, or like the like vision, like when you think about like an inventor, like, I've got this brilliant idea, I've invented this machine that can like cook food on demand, like you press one button and it turns, like makes food appear. I've invented a teleportation device, you can move from here to here, like this is like an amazing piece of technology, right? It's a breakthrough. This can be a pitch, but you have a really high bar to meet, right? And what's magical about startups is that today there's so many startups that are just about taking existing technology and applying it to sort of a market that hasn't adopted it yet, but you're sort of using tools that already exist. But there are also people out there that are like doing things that literally didn't exist before, right? Like, if you invent, a teleportation device, you don't need to say anything more, right? It doesn't matter how much it costs. Like, it doesn't matter, like, there are no competitors. Like, how big is the market? Like, there are a million ways that we could use a teleportation device, right? But the bar is high. The bar is high for this one. So, the dream team, right? Like, this is one where your team in particular has the ability to execute in a way that's unlike anyone else, right? Where, you know, maybe the idea is kind of obvious, but the ramifications of, like, it's going to be about who wins, right? And then you want to explain why you're going to win, right? So you want to say that you're the perfect team to take on this challenge. So I remember there was a company in our batch called, I can't remember what it was called now, but they were basically, it was like legal technology, right? Like we talked about, it's hard necessarily to do legal technology, but there's a company called like LegalZoom, which is like worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and they basically make like forums and like help you connect to legal resources. They're not actually doing any like actual law, right? And so these two guys come up and they're like, we're both engineers and we're both lawyers, right? We have electrical engineering degrees, we have JDs, right? So we're the only people who can like make this, who know the real legal sort of like situation. Some engineer who just makes it, they wouldn't be able to get that. And we have the skills to execute. If a lawyer just wanted to do this and saw this, they'd have to like work with a developer and they wouldn't know how to do it. We're the only ones who know how to do both, and we're gonna make like real legal technology work. Right, and so what we did is like all our convertible notes, all our investment stuff was done through their platform, and they took like 2 years to launch because they wanted to make sure that it was so bulletproof that no other lawyer. They were like, we know lawyers, we know they're going to try to tear us up, so we have to make it bulletproof, right? But that's where you can talk about the dream team, where you're like, or it's like instead of both of them, it's like so and so is like the head of X, so and so is the head of Y. They would never meet, but like because of like the way it's worked out, together we're going to be unbeatable. So there's two more here. Consumerification of enterprise. So this is the idea that a lot of enterprise software is really bad. It's really clunky. It's really like just terrible. And more companies are starting to adopt SaaS products, and sort of there's this level of sophistication from consumer products that people are starting to expect now. And so you can talk about how you're making something that's like really good for consumers, and you're gonna eat your way into the enterprise, and you're gonna basically say like, we're gonna do like the right version of X, right? Where X is some like old school product, we're gonna do like the clean, simple, fast, efficient version of this product. So, like it's kind of like so an example is like a company that does screen sharing. There's like screen sharing is more important than ever, especially we've got people all around the world that we're working with, but most of the software that exists to do screen sharing is really like clunky, it really sucks, and people are gonna adopt our software, and we've made it dead simple, and we've opened up the market because it's so much cheaper. All these small businesses that couldn't afford the like $10,000 a year screen sharing plan can now afford our product, so we've opened up the market, and we're gonna like kill all those big guys. So this is the last one. This was actually one, I had written this article like 2 years ago, and someone like in the comments actually proposed this one, so I can't take credit for it. I forget who the name of the person is now, but they proposed this one, city businesses at scale. So the idea is that like you have a city business that's high margins, and you can put it in a lot of cities all around the world. Right, so there are about 1,000, this is from him, there are about 1,000 cities with over 1 million people in them, right? And if you can build something that makes about $1 million a year with a 20% profit margin, and you can do it for any city that's over 1 million people, then you can raise, lots of money to build something that goes all around the world, right? Like a lot of these companies like HomeJoy, right? Where HomeJoy is this company that came through YC, and they make it really easy to order home cleaning, and now they're trying to build out other verticals, right? Every city has people who need people to come into their house and clean their house, right? Or needs plumbing like services or whatever, but you have to build it in each single city because you got to like figure out who the home cleaners are, and then you have to like get that city to know about you, and then you have to like go to the next city. But if you have a process that you can repeat, you can say like, we've done it in San Francisco, we're making this much money, there are at least like another 50 cities that are as big as San Francisco, and we're just going to come in and we're going to drop our machine, and we're going to like the world destroyer machine, you just like plant it down, and it's like takes over the city, and you go to the next city, right? So those are the 12. We're going to take a quick break, and then I want you guys to think about the business that you are thinking about, or the business that you work in. And I'm going to invite some of you to come and try to pitch your business from one of these archetypes. So let's take a break.
Okay, we are called Rate Monitor. So Rate Monitor basically allow you to manage your projects anytime, anywhere. It is for the real estate contractors and developers to manage their projects online on demand. Basically, we like to be like the DHL for the real estate sector. DHL enable you to track your project. DHL Express to able to track your parcel from the day you deposit parcel to the day it delivered, and it allow you to anybody to log on to track online. So similarly for projects, we track the projects from the start of the buying of the land to construction to design to delivery. So basically we track every point of the project for the real estate developer. Our customer segment are basically on three customer segments. First, the project CEO. He will be able to check the project on his own multiple devices, wherever the project is. For the project manager, he will be able to check the project life cycle from start of the project to the end of the project. And for the construction manager and the field supervisors, he will be able to monitor and track the projects on the site itself. And lastly, also for the bankers, when they lend the money to the buyers or to the developers, they are able to track the progress of the loan through the status of the project online. And very importantly, for the buyers of property inbox, they will be able by the inbox to able to enable all their paper hard copy of their sales transactions and all that will be go online on the paperless environment. So basically, we empower the people to manage their projects and information on demand.
Thank you. Great job. All right, let's get some feedback going on here. What about some positive feedback that we can offer for that pitch? I thought you had a pretty clear understanding of your customer segments, which is good that you had, these different ones and you knew what your product was providing each one. Anybody else? Any feedback? You can also feel free to give him the feedback later if you don't want to give him in public. I think one of the things that you could improve on is, again, like trying to understand why is this needed? Right? Like you talked about X for Y, so it's like DHL Express for what was for projects, real estate projects, and so DHL Express is like valuable because you're worried about where things are happening. Where's your you're paying for that to know what's going on, right? And so I would like to see that part fleshed out as to explain why the metaphor makes sense, right? Why does it make sense? I believe it. Real estate developers probably also are freaking out about their project, want to know what's going on all the time. But you have to make that clear to me. You have to convey that to me that this is they match, right? The X for Y matches because the same situation is happening in Y as it does for X. But thanks. Anybody else want to volunteer? Where's that guy? I saw him earlier. Where'd he go? Yeah, great. Everyone, what's your name?
Christine.
Stand up. And which archetype are you using?
Sorry?
Which one of the ones that we talked about are you going to use?
Oh, just my own feedback.
Oh, you're just going to give your own pitch?
Yeah.
All right.
No, I mean just my own feedback. Even though it's 2 minutes, but it sounds like a really big project that involves a lot of people, and because it's construction, right? So it feels like it's a really big project that involves a lot of different parties, a lot of legalities.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe he doesn't have time to address that, but. When I heard it, my first...
You started getting nervous.
Yeah, I said, it sounds really big, like a lot of things to do.
Got it. Well, thank you for that feedback. Do you want to pitch your startup? You have a startup. Come on. That's what I thought you were going to do. Come on, here you go. All right.
But it's more on getting ideas.
Well, no. Tell me about what you're doing now. Let's, pitch what you have now, and then we can talk about the stuff we talked about afterwards.
Okay. My name is Christine Chiu. So I'm dealing with events planning and event supplies. And as you know, when you're dealing with products, you find that products needs to be packaged and needs to be delivered. So after doing it for a while, I find that I want to narrow down and be more focused. So now trying to find like how to make people's events easier. Is there a digital solutions that can help people with their events before, during, and after? So I'm still at ideology stage at the moment. So if you all got any ideas, do let me know. So I can't really pitch too much because I'm at this stage at the moment. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we'll do some more interactive later. We're going to get some more people in the hot seat. We've got some people that I think are going to be really great for the hot seat. But I'm going to talk a little bit about, and this is very basic, we're going to just talk about some stuff that I feel like is valuable for, again, Silicon Valley, like high growth, high tech companies. Things that I'm going to try to keep in mind as I do my next company, right, when it comes to fundraising. So, some of these I have slides for, some of them I'm just going to talk about. So, get introductions, right? The first thing is that most investors don't want to be approached like cold, right? Even though there's this idea that you make a business plan and you send it to them, that's not really how it works. Like, yeah, sure, they might check that box every once in a while on their website, but the way you get the way you pitch investors, that you get an introduction from somebody else. And it's usually, the best case scenario is another investor that's already invested in your company. But after that, maybe it's another investor. Maybe it's a founder that this investor has backed that, says, hey, I think they're really smart. But there has to be an introduction through somebody. That's the best way, and it's usually over email, and you forward I've done this a lot for my own investors, right? I know people, or I've met people, where I talk to people, and they talk to me about my startup, and then I say, like, at the end of it, they say, like, well, we're fundraising, and I'm like, okay, I think that my investors would be interested in this, right? And it's a big thing, right? Because I can't offer that to everybody, because if I do that every single time, and they see a lot of companies that they don't feel that excited about, then they're going to start to discount me. I'm going to lose credibility. And that's exactly why the introduction is so important, because they know that if they're getting an introduction, it's somebody who is risking a little bit of their political capital to make this connection for you. But on the flip side, it also means that, like, if I refer them some company that ends up being really successful, then they're going to remember that, right? Of course, they're going to be like, oh yeah, Jason's that guy. I'll just invest in that company that made a lot of money, right? And so it's a benefit to me. So, sort of what I think I'm going to do, right, if I were to start another company right now, or let's say I was planning to, and I made some progress and I wanted to, like, raise money, what I would do is I'd start talking to entrepreneurs that I knew, right? And I would ask them for feedback. I would say, like, this is what I'm working on, this is who I'm trying to target, here's how I'm going to make money, this is the product. And I would just listen, and I would get feedback, and just do that with a lot of people, right? Be like, thank you so much, like, really value your feedback, and then just move on and do these conversations. I would do like 10, 20, I'd do a lot of them. And then I would work for like a month, and then I'd come back to them and I'd be like, hey, I wanted to circle back, I wanted to show you, like, what we've been doing. Maybe it's a month, maybe it's 2 months. And be like, look at all this stuff that I've done. I, like, totally took your suggestion to do whatever, and that totally worked. And here's all these other things that we've done. And they're like, wow, this is great. That's so exciting. Is there anything I can do to help? Be like, yes, there is. What do you think about making this introduction to your investor? Blah, blah, blah. Like, I think, they could be a really good fit for my company because they've invested in these other companies, or whatever. They have the experience. Sometimes it's good to have a reason why, like, that particular investor. It's not like, just anybody, whoever, like, you want to be able to say, like, I think this investor is important because they have experience in this market, or they, know a lot about doing, like, mobile apps and whatever, right? And so and then I would do that. I would come back to all those entrepreneurs after I, like, used their advice, or I did more stuff and I was more successful, and then, show them that progress, and then they feel that energy of, like, wow, last time I saw them, they were doing only this, and now 2 months later doing all this, and, like, this is a great move, right? So introductions, super important. The second thing is, like, you want to, this isn't on here, but you want to pick, like, a good milestone, right? You want to, like, have a reason why you're fundraising now. I mean, the answer is often just like, well, I need money, or, like, it would be good to have money because I can hire people and do all these things. But that's not the answer. That's not the reason why you tell an investor why you need money, right? The reason why you tell them you need money is because of a specific thing, like we, just hit this milestone, we got like 10,000 users, and now we really know we can invest in like more cities, right? We've just done it in this city, now we're ready to expand into new cities, and like that's why we need the money, right? Or like we've seen like growth that's been like at a good clip for a pretty long period of time, right? And so we know that what we're doing is working, and we want to like build out the next part of the feature set that we know we need, right? And we need to hire engineers to do that, right? Or like, so-and-so just announced that they were going to enter the market, and we want to beat them to the market. So we need, like you need to have a reason. You need to have like a pressure, like this urgency that's related to your business, not related to the fact that like, that's related to your business in a strategic way, not just because financially you need to be able to do that, right? That's in the best case scenario. So decks, you're still basically going to need to be presenting PowerPoint presentations for the most part. I think that's still kind of the way it's done. I think slides, you try to keep the slides fairly simple. You go through the various things that we talked about, the team, the sort of product need, and like, again, those slides can tell a story. It doesn't have to be like so simple, like, and probably better, I mean, it's probably fine if you do it, but like team, and then just like info on the team, and then like market, like at least telling some bit of that story, that like archetype in the front to kind of roll people into the rest of the pitch is I think important. A lot of investors will ask you for the deck ahead of time. They want to see the deck. Ideally, you don't actually want to send them the whole deck, because I think that kind of, they might cut you out before they even meet with you, and you really want to meet with them because you want to be able to show them through your energy and enthusiasm why this is so great, and you want to be able to answer their questions when they're like, how are they going to deal with whatever? You want to be able to like see them ask that question and then answer it, rather than have them think about it and be like, this isn't going to work, and then just move on. So, but then at the same time, they want to see the deck because they want to know, like, is this even the right, or even close, right? And usually the intro will have like a paragraph, right? It'll be like, right, so-and-so makes this for that, and it's a growing market, or we have this many users, or like whatever, and we're doing this. But that, they usually want a little bit more. So what I would probably do in my next round would be to like make a abridged deck that doesn't have the full information, right? Maybe like 5 slides, where it's like, 1 slide on the product, 1 slide on the market, 1 slide on the team, and then like traction, and then show a graph that's blurry or something, and be like, to get the full numbers, like, we got to talk, like, so I think that, decks are valuable in that way. Some people have talked about, like, if you have making an appendix, where if you know that there are people who ask a lot of questions, maybe they're not part of your presentation, you can create like an appendix where you have like the answers to questions. So they're like, yeah, like Christine was like, yeah, what about the legal hurdles, right? And you'd be like, well, legal hurdle, and then you kind of go through it, where maybe you don't want to like talk, and like sometimes it's good to address the question right there. Sometimes it's like by putting it right there, it's like, I know a lot of you might have legal hurdle questions, here's the answers, but sometimes you might have a lot of questions that only sometimes people ask, and then you might leave them at the end. Another tactic that I remember one of the founders of WePay does is he talks about like landing a haymaker. So a haymaker is like a punch where it's like a really big punch. And so the haymaker is kind of like this idea where when they were doing WePay, it was like a payment processing thing, and they would say like, in the pitch, they would say like, payments are really tricky because there are state-by-state regulations for the way like financial transactions are dealt with. So it's a pretty tough market, right? And of course, when you hear that, the investor is going to be like, well, so how are you going to address that, right? And then he would be like, well, we have signed contracts with like 40 out of the 50 states that like in all major banks and blah, 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 all this stuff, and just kind of like blows them away with this like big answer. And that can be powerful because, right, we talked about investor psychology and emotion. If you're like, damn, like, okay, like they got it taken care of, like all of a sudden you're just much more impressed with them. So that can be like an approach that you want to take. I'll do one more before. And so another thing that I think is important is to know that different investors have different styles of wanting to be pitched. So I remember when we started, we didn't really have a deck because we went to some YC presentations where some people who are really good at fundraising were like, don't use a deck. We didn't use a deck. You don't need a deck anymore. You just talk to them. And we were like, cool, we're not going to make a deck. And we just like went into a meeting with no deck. We were like, so you saw us in demo day and you like know what we do. Do you have any questions? And like that did not go well, right? And so obviously we had to go back. We had to make a deck. But sometimes some investors like to ask a lot of questions. Like, not that I'm an investor, but I would imagine that someday in the future, if I was, I would want to ask questions. I don't want to hear. I kind of want to interrupt you. Like after you say the first thing, I'm like, what about the? Who do you what? And I want to flesh it out for myself. But some investors want to have the story, right? Like some investors don't want to wait until they ask you, like, what about the legal hurdles, and then you answer the question. Some of them want you to tell them ahead of time, like, there are legal concerns for this startup. Here they are addressed because it shows that you've thought about it and then you know what they care about, right? And they're kind of judging how you're thinking about the business. So different investors have different styles. I remember we were pitching this one investor, Owen Van Natta, and he was like, he's only a part-time investor because he worked for Facebook, then he worked at Amazon, he worked at he was working at Zynga at the time, and so he had like picked a lot of good companies, but and we got an introduction to him because we never would have been able to get in touch with him ourselves. And we're describing Rijo, and we're talking about like marketplaces and like Airbnb, and he's like not really paying attention. I'm like, oh man, this is not good. Like, how are we gonna get him back? And so I asked him, I like stopped and I was like, how do you like to invest in companies, right? I asked him that question straight up. And he was like, I've never felt like I was really an ideas guy. Like when I met Mark Zuckerberg, I just was really impressed by him. And so I like joined his team, and like, I just like to work with people who are really good at what they do and like strong teams. That's what I invested in. And I was like, great, well, let me tell you about my friend and me and how we lived together, and we started a nonprofit together in college, and I used to be a gymnast and like teamwork and blah, 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 and like just completely threw out the rest of the stuff, right? You just throw it out. And he invested it that day. Like he didn't even wait another day. Normally they're like a second meeting. No second meeting. He doesn't have time for that. He's like, okay, my assistant will like write the check for you, like. Okay, cool. That was like the only time we'd ever gotten like on the spot sign. And it was like about catering to them, right? So, let's see. The last thing, some people have been asking about like valuation and like how do you value your company and how do you, like at the end of the day, right? Like the value of anything is what people are willing to pay for it. So if there are more people that are willing to pay, that drives up the price, right? Supply and demand. There's only so much stock to go around in this round, and so who's going to get it? If you want it, you have to pay more, right? So the important thing is to create a competitive dynamic, and it's very challenging because you basically have to have multiple conversations with lots of different investors all at the same time. You want to line them up so that everyone's kind of like offering you, similar to the way if you've ever tried to get a job in a competitive way, it's like you want to get multiple offers, right? So then you can be like, well, so-and-so is offering this much, but I really like working with you, but is there some way that we can make this work? And then they're like, well, maybe we can do, and so you've got that. Like, so for us, we had like a VC that was willing to put in half the round, but they were like a, $10 billion fund, and for them, that much money was like nothing. So like they weren't going to care about us. And so we weren't like, of course we cared about the money, but we were like trying to get other people to like, once we had that, we could say to somebody else like, we've had half a round covered by so-and-so, but we're really looking for the right partner, and that like helps, right? So creating that competitive dynamic. So again, being able to like get more intros is really helpful, and being able to have like a large range. You take what you can get at the end of the day, right? Like fundraising is generally a big, I don't want to say waste of time, but while you're doing it, you can't do anything that's like actually good for the business, right? You're going to meetings, you're like sending emails, you're like looking up investors' profiles online. It's a huge time suck, and it's not that helpful. And so you really basically want to find opportunities where like once you've like got that moment and you can do it and you can do it easy and you can get it done, you do it there. And I think that's also why we tried to raise funding right after like YC demo day because we had that hype and we knew like this is our best chance for a while to like go and raise that money. So let's just do it and let's put it in the bank. I think that the downside of the way we did it was that it made us feel like we were more validated with our business than we perhaps actually were, right? And then we started like spending that money and hiring people. Like if we could have just like put it in the bank and then still spent that year as if we had no money and tried to like work on it, that would have been great. Of course, the investors wouldn't necessarily want that. They're like, I gave you money so you could use it, not so you can just like save it away, right? I mean, our investors wanted us to spend the entire amount in a year and a half. And we spent, you know, only half that amount in a year and a half. And to some degree, like, the question is, like, well, why didn't we use it? Like, maybe we could have done stuff with that money that would have made the company successful. It's hard to say. But so, like, so like, another thing is to keep in mind, like, what are your investors' expectations for you, right? Are they looking for, like, a, 3-5 year return? Or are they looking, like, in the long term, right? Like, you generally are looking for investors that are looking at the long term because you don't want somebody who's going to be like at, you know, year 3, like looking at their clock being like, how long is this going to take, right? Because startups are hard and it might take a really long time. I mean, HomeJoy, I mean, again, to go, like, how many of you have heard of HomeJoy? Not a lot of you. They're like at a tremendously successful company, but they were like a 2009 YC company. It was like a brother-sister pair, and they like worked on all these different businesses for like many years. For like 3 years, they were just like doing various things and like not really going anywhere. And now they've got like this big and growing business. You know, they raised like $40 million recently, and like they're doing like well outside of just the money. But like it took a long time to get there. Right now, this is like 5, almost 6 years after when they started. Right, so. You know, looking for investors that are seeking the long term are valuable. Cool. So those are a few things. It sounds like a lot of people have questions, so I'm definitely ready to open it up to questions. Anybody has any, and then we can do some hot seat. Yeah.
So in terms of congratulations, how does the investors
Yeah, so it comes back to this, right? How much are other people offering you, right? With us, because we were in YC, we kind of came in under this class, and they were, you know, people, we were open with each other, so we would tell each other what we were raising at. So then you could be like, we know that the right amount, not the right amount, but what everyone else is getting is this, and so we can kind of like hold the line and be like, you know, I'm not going to accept anything below this amount, right? And they also know what they're investing in. But at the end of the day, it's what you're getting an offer for, right? If someone gives you an offer for, like, I think it's good for the investor to make the first offer, right? Like in general rule, like they need to set the floor, right? Or they need to set what the expectation is. Yeah, it's very hard to value startups in the early stage with any logical manner, right? If you're really successful and you're growing really fast, you can command more. You can just say like, more people want to invest, and so the price is going up, right? You can say the price is going up once you have a sense of like how interested investors are in you. And you can also offer, if you're doing convertible notes, you can sometimes offer different rates to different people, although that might upset other people, so that's a tactic you want to be careful when you take on.
When you start raising money, how good is your traction? And then is there like a amount of traction that the investors can continue?
It depends on the business, right? Like, so for us, we didn't have much traction, right? We had the Burning Man thing, and that like was a good chart, but again, it was one event, right? And then we're not repeating that. It wasn't like that was the growth rate for now and forever, right? So it really depends. That was like a special case, you know, and it depends on the business, right? If it's a consumer product, traction might be like 100,000 users, right? Like, you know, for a for a seed, it's the difference between like a seed round and a Series A, right? The bigger the amount you're raising, the more traction you need to have, right? If it's an enterprise company, maybe you just have one big deal signed, right? That's enough, right? So it really depends on the kind of company and the kind of business that you're in. Did you have a question?
For let's say at each round, example, let's say seed or Series A,
Yeah.
how many investors should we aim for? At the round, should we aim for one or two big ones, or should we aim for a few smaller ones?
Yeah, so there's this concept of what's called the party round, where like a lot of people are all in, but nobody's like leading. Like the way it used to work is like you'd have like a lead investor, and you'd have like one person who invested the whole thing, right? And then it became like, well, you know, one person will invest a lot, and then everyone, like some people can add on. And like the way we and with seed and earlier rounds, I think it's less important if you have like a lead, but with later rounds, you typically have like one company that's putting in the majority of the stake in. I think it can be nice to have multiple investors because it's like gives you different perspectives. But I think it was nice that we also had a lead investor, so one company that was like very thinking about us all the time. Because if you have an investor that's just like put a lot of money into like 20 companies, it's hard for them to think about all your companies at once.
Like follow from these questions, right? So how do you actually decide like how much are you going to pay when you get so many investors?
Sorry, what's the question?
How do you actually decide how much
I think that the rule of thumb is to not give away more than 20 to 25% of your company at any given round, because that just kind of blows up. Like if you do that for more than a few times, you're just like, you have like no stake in the company, right? So I think with our version, it was like 17%, right? It was 1 out of 6, or 1.3 out of 6 or something. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the rule of thumb. But again, it's what you can get. And then you have to decide if you're okay with that. Yeah?
Basically, the investor is purchasing from the founder, higher par value compared to the founder. Is that how it works? Because, for example, the founder purchased their own shares at 1 cent per share. Are you selling to the investor at $1 a share and issue out new shares?
You typically issue new shares in any situation, right? So you've got like you've got like 100,000 shares, and then with the new raise, like you issue more shares, and the founders get some shares, but the investor gets X amount of shares that are worth like whatever their percent is of the new company, right? So you get diluted, right, in the process. So like you own 100%, and then you raise money, and you own 100% because you have like 100,000 shares, and now you issue like another 25,000 shares to this investor, so now they own 20% of the company, and you own 100,000 shares still, but now you own, whatever, 80% of the company. Has gone up, yeah. Other questions? We're going to try to get somebody in the hot seat. Where is that guy? Yeah. QNAP? What was the name? You? Yeah. Angel Hack, right? Cool. What? Everybody welcome, what's your name? Advent. That's a cool name. All right, we're going to get some chairs. Yeah. Cool. Welcome. So, tell me the name of your company.
Well, the name of my company is we incorporated in the United States under the name ThinkQ Incorporation. But
ThinkQ.
ThinkQ.
Yeah.
Yeah, but currently is a skeleton company. So right now I'm operating in Malaysia under Infinity Labs Sdn Bhd. That's the name of my company. But the product that we are working on is called Q-Smart. It's actually a queuing solution.
Okay.
Like in the United States, you probably call it waiting in line.
Waiting in line. Yeah, queuing, waiting in line. So who buys your product?
We generate revenues from two sources. The first is the general public, who actually we charge them for requesting a queuing spot remotely. And the second segment is actually from the service provider who implements the queuing solutions.
Okay, so you take money from both sides.
Yes.
And so that's great. So what is the pricing model?
Well, okay, for the service providers, it's a cloud-based solution, so it has to be a subscription-based model. So we have two models. One that is free. It's intended to encourage adoption for the queuing solutions. The other is a paid model. So that actually comes with a support, additional functions, and also revenue sharing for serving remotely requested numbers. As for the public, we charge them, well, it depends on the service provider and also the load factor of the line.
Service provider, okay, depends on so like restaurants is one.
Yeah, restaurant is one, bankings, hospitals, clinics, government agencies. So there's a lot of places where this can be implemented.
And how many customers do you have?
Right now, zero traction.
Zero traction.
Yeah.
But so what have you built so far?
Well, we are like, we would say we are about 80% done with our MVP.
Okay.
Yeah, and we are targeting a rollout like end of December or latest by early January. So we are at a stage where we are strategizing on getting the first few pilot testers.
Okay, so what are you going to try to get as your first set of customers?
Well, right now, we want to go with the clinics because we think we have a leverage with the clinics.
Health clinics?
Sorry?
Like health clinics?
Yeah, health clinics, especially like specialists. So we know like there are a lot of specialist clinics who, for example, that specializes in what do they call it, like pregnancies and also like pediatricians that doesn't use a queuing system, but their queue is just horrendous. So like people actually have to wait a long time, and people have to go there again and again. So it actually makes a lot of sense for them to implement this.
Okay, and this is in the U.S. or is in other countries?
In Malaysia.
In Malaysia, so this is going to be in Malaysia.
Yeah.
Okay, so why are there any other companies that are doing this?
Well, we have done our research, and there is one company that comes very close to what we are doing. It's called Qless, and it's based in the United States. But so far, they are not a cloud solution, and
They are not a what?
They are not a cloud solution.
So they're like, you have to install software on
Exactly. So you have to contact them to get a demo. They will come, they will implement it. You have to purchase like custom hardwares, like a ticketing machine and all.
Oh yeah, forget that. Forget that.
So what we are doing is actually a cloud solution. So the general idea is you can just register and get it up and running. So that it comes with like zero custom hardware, but of course with additional hardwares you can like improve the queuing
But so
system.
then the question is, are people comfortable with this behavior? This is a new behavior. You have to like educate them on doing it this way.
Well, I don't think it is really a new behavior. Like we do have this problem, especially in Malaysia. I mean, I have to go to the Inland Revenue Board every month to actually settle my taxes, like the company taxes. So we do have this issue. So
no, I mean, I know you have a problem, but you're not used to using a online reservation system to queue.
I would not say it's a reservation system because we try not to go there, but it's actually, I understand that, yeah.
Tell me why you're making this distinction between queue and reservation.
Well, okay, what we are trying to do is we are trying to build upon existing solution. So currently people do queue by taking a ticket from I mean, people are familiar with this current behavior.
That's true.
So we are trying to build on top of that. Our queuing solutions does exactly that and a lot more by bringing it online.
But do you have to, what if you don't have the app? Like, is there a way to allow the people who aren't using the app to seamlessly stay inside the system?
Yes. So if you do not have an app, so you would just go there as per normal and you get a ticket and then you just wait for your number to be called.
So you're integrating with the whatever thing produces the ticket?
Yes. So they can like implement the entire queuing
Does the
solution.
ticket have a machine? Is this a machine that makes the ticket?
There is a machine that makes a ticket, but you do not need to have a machine. If it's a small establishment, you can just say your number is, I don't know, 30. Just wait for your number to be called.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can also like write on a little stick-it note and just hand
And
it out
just
to
give
them.
it to people. And
Yeah.
so would they be using your ticketing system in the future? Like if they're making the ticket, like the machine, you just pull the tickets right off the machine, and they get a version of it so they can see what's coming up. Like, do you take that away, like, or do they have to input that? You know, do you see what I'm saying? Like, you don't see it. So okay, in like when I've gotten lunch at the deli, right, and you have to like pull off of this tab, and it pulls a number and says like 36 on it, right? And so how then does somebody get 37 if 37's right on that ticket right there? If they pull it, like how does it go away? How do I know that I'm 36 and the next person who's 37 who books online, and then someone pulls and they get 37 on this ticket?
Well, the general workflow will be you have to go there and get the number. So you will get like 36, and then the next guy who actually like get the number online will get 37.
Yeah, but then if someone walks there and takes the next, you have to like take away the 37 one from somebody else.
It will not be printed. It will not be. I mean, it will be printed on demand. So it's not like pre-printed.
I see. So most of the machines that do this do this.
Yeah, I think the one that we are familiar in Malaysia is not pre-printed. You press a button and you get a number.
Got it. And so you're going to integrate with that.
Yes.
Okay. How much do you think people are going to pay for this?
Well, we have done a bit of survey. It's not like too big, but we generally found that like if you pay like a ringgit for a ticket that you can get from your house, it actually makes sense to a lot of people, and even possibly more. Like for example, if you want to renew your passport, like typically what we do is we get out of our house like early in the morning, and then probably we'll get it done by 10 or 11. So if you can actually just wake up and get a number by paying 1 or 2 ringgit, and then instead of going at 7, you can now go at 9 or 10. It makes a lot of sense for you to do it.
Yeah, I did that with my visa to come to China, so yeah. I feel the pain.
Yeah.
But what's the hardest part about this business? Like, why can't anybody do this?
Why can't anybody else do this?
Yeah, so my question is basically like, why is this difficult to do? You know, like to make, right, to copy essentially. Like, how are you going to prevent other people from coming in and doing this as well?
I have to be honest, I do not have a good answer to that. But I'm just saying that like we have this problem in the market. All of us feel it. And yet, none of us actually seen the solution online as of right now.
And why do you think that is? Why don't you, like, this is an interesting thing that I always encourage founders to think about. Like, if you have a great idea and like you have a thing that's like a solution to that idea, why doesn't it exist already? And the answer usually isn't no one's thought of it, but there's usually something else going on. But I'd like to hear your answer.
Well, we just think that nobody actually has made an effort.
You don't think anyone's tried?
Yeah, I mean, like it just happened like that you have like this giant problem, like just hiding in a plain view, like what you mentioned earlier, like, or maybe people just don't think that they can capitalize on this or make money out of it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone. This is Advent.
Thank you very much.
And so I understand that you recently came back from San Francisco.
Yeah, I did.
And you were at a competition. What was it called?
It's called Angel Hack. It's an Angel Hack competition.
And how many teams were competing in this competition?
There were 28 teams that comes from all around the world and compete in that competitions.
And who won that competition?
We did. The team.
Give it up, Malaysian startup.
Thank you.
International winner. Great job. Thank you. Cool. So next up, we are going to do. So we're doing tea at 4. Is that right? Okay. I'm gonna do. We're going to talk about growth and how to get customers for your startup. So I have to say that I've adapted a lot of this information from a book called, what is it called? It's called Traction, and it's by Gabe Wernstein. Right, let me just look it up so I can tell you. If you go to tractionbook.com, you'll be able to find it. This is the book, so I just want to show you. Here, the Startup Guide to Getting Customers. I've talked to one of the founders, Justin Mayers, really smart guy. They've been working on this book for like several years, where they did a lot of interviews with a lot of different founders and business owners and tried to talk through how they grew their business. And they've identified like 19 different channels for growing a business. And so I'm going to kind of see where something smart is already existing and walk you through some of their ideas rather than try to like make something from scratch, because I think they're really smart folks. So the first thing to keep in mind is that this is Mark Andreessen. He is one of the two partners of Andreessen Horowitz, which is one of the leading investment firms for startups. I think some survey in 2013 of like hundreds of founders, they were like the #1 choice for founders to get investment from. And they say the #1 reason that they pass on investors that they'd like to back is that they focus on the product in exclusion of everything else, right? And everything else means primarily getting customers, right? Getting users. And you know, this is the thing that happens a lot. YC's motto is a phrase called "make things people want," right? It's about, you know, what's great about entrepreneurship is that you can express your creativity, you can sort of like, you know, create something into the world that you think belongs there, that should exist. But at the end of the day, if people don't want it, if people don't use it, if people don't pay you money for it, it won't work, and it's going to be like a waste of your time unless you think of it like an art project, right? An art project exists, it can be beautiful, can be awesome, and it doesn't have to do anything, right? But if you want to build a business, you have to make something people want, and you have to find ways of getting to those customers. So this second quote is by Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel is one of the co-founders of a big security company, blanking on the name right now, but he was also an early investor in Facebook. He was a co-founder of PayPal. So he's a guy who's been around, and he's, you know, he did a class on startups at Stanford, and he says that he talks about how, like, with distribution channels, he talks in this book called 0 to 1, where he talks about like the power law, and he talks about how the power law kind of shows that like in most markets there's one leader that kind of like dominates the space. If you look at like ice cream flavors, like vanilla is #1 and everything else is kind of like chocolate, you know, like strawberry mint, you know, like it's all small compared to vanilla being the #1. And with like distribution channels, with like with marketing channels, there's probably one channel that works best for your company. And so, right, for us, it was like Craigslist, and maybe what we should have done is instead of like trying to do all these different channels, we should have gone even harder on Craigslist, gone until we couldn't use it anymore, and then like switched and found that new one, right? And so what they advocate for in this book, Traction book, is one, that there's probably going to be one distribution channel that works best, and that two, most founders are not familiar with all the different channels. So they talk a lot about breadth, that there are a lot of different ways that you can get customers. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to do all of those ways, but you should be aware of them, and you should be comfortable with them, and you should run tests to see which one of them is going to be the best for your business. And the last thing so we're going to walk through each of those types, but before we do, I'm going to just say one more thing, which is like milestones, right? I think this is something I wish we did more of at Ridejoy, was to identify customer milestones, whether that's like number of users or a sort of growth rate that you're comfortable with, or like number of actions taken, right? Number of like tweets, right? Maybe it's okay if you have less users, but you have more actions that are happening, right? Like, so usage, right? So being able to set milestones for yourself and be working towards them is really important, because it lets you know that you're doing the right thing, right? And if it's okay. I think the reason why we struggle with it is because milestones often feel arbitrary. You're like, of course I want as many users as possible, like 10,000, 100,000, like million, like they're all good, just more, right? But I think it's good to be disciplined with yourself and to say, like, if we can't get, like, right, like if you're thinking about, you're getting ready to launch your product, if we can't get, 10 businesses to sign on to this in 3 months, then like with this channel, then we're doing something wrong, right? Or like we really need to reevaluate our strategy, because like we should be able to do that, right? So setting milestones for yourself, having a number and a target date. Similar to what we were doing before, we're going to go through a lot of different tactics. First one, viral marketing. So this is the idea that your users are going to market for you, right? The earliest version of this was like the idea of with Hotmail. Hotmail was the email by Microsoft, and what they did was at the end of every email included a line that said like, this email was sent by Hotmail, right? So every time a user sends an email, you get an ad in front of that other person, right? And so you can kind of build from there, right? Another version of this was that like app that I was telling some people about, an app where it like writes text messages for you. So you could be like, oh, I want to write like a sorry apology text message to my friend, and it required tokens. And the tokens I thought were going to cost money, but instead their cost was invites. So if you can invite 10 people, then you get 10 tokens to use inside the platform, right? That's a pretty interesting way to sort of think about acquiring users. And they have a whole system where they talk about it in the book, and like I encourage you to read the book if you're interested in this. But when you talk about, there's essentially a K factor, right? So it's sort of like it's like the K, so it's like you've got a new user, and the K is essentially how many, on average, for every new user that you get, on average, how many additional users do you get, right? And so anything with a K value of even above like 0.5 is like good, where it's like every user is going to refer like, every 2 users is going to refer 1 user. That's like great. But like the real true viral is essentially where your K factor is above 1, right? So every user that you get on average gets you like 1 point something like more users, right? And so that's where you're really starting to see this exponential curve. Some people, I've talked to, I've heard this secondhand, so I don't know if it's 100% true, but someone has told me that one of the reasons why Facebook beat MySpace was because they built the find your friends contact integration to like Outlook and like some other mail and like Hotmail faster than MySpace did. And it was like a month faster, right? But that was the month that mattered because, right, with Facebook, there'd be like, why don't you find your friends? Why don't you like invite your friends to Facebook? And then like with one click, you could like email everyone in your inbox. And like maybe not everyone does that, and I bet most of us wouldn't do that, but enough people did that was like inviting tons more users into the system, right? And so that's an interesting perspective on Facebook. It's not the design, it's not this, it's that they built a better address invite system faster than the other guy, right? And that's like, when we get obsessed with products, we have to remember that distribution matters so much. So that's viral marketing. And it's good for apps. It's like different channels are going to be good for different types of businesses. So like with viral marketing, it's going to be more for apps that anybody can use, right? With email, almost anybody can use it. With Facebook, almost anybody can use it. And so that makes sense. It's easy to refer to people because it's like a general use product. Where viral marketing is going to work less well for like, if you're a company that helps people get divorces faster, right? Refer your friends. Like, it's not going to work as well, right? So different channels work as well for different people. So PR. PR kind of comes in 2 categories. There's like the traditional media, and then there's publicity stunts. So traditional media is just this idea that you get written up in newspapers and in magazines, and that can fuel your growth. Like a lot of us, we can get excited about. For instance, it used to be like the TechCrunch effect, right? Like you want to get your startup on TechCrunch because that's validation. Maybe that'll help you with fundraising. And you also think that like you want early adopters, so you want like those people who read TechCrunch to use your product. Sometimes that can work, but oftentimes people are disappointed by like the results. But there are situations where like having media can really helpful. So Airbnb talked about how they were featured in the travel section of the Washington Post, and that like had this huge impact on their business, right? All these people who before might have thought Airbnb was kind of weird, all of a sudden it's like been validated. It's like okay, it's like it's been written about in the Washington Post. It's like a real thing, and so there were a lot of people. There was a huge spike, and they said basically their like traffic doubled indefinitely, right? Because then if the Washington Post writes about it, all these other blogs write about it, and then like people are linking to it, and then it's just sort of like, they just double their traffic. And they said that it happened again when the New York Times wrote about them, and they had this huge spike, and then their traffic doubled again. So we were like, dang. So we actually spent a lot of time looking to try to get press because we thought that we could sort of take that same approach, that same strategy for ourselves. It didn't work as well, and you know, I think that's a lesson for us, but I think it's important to know that like press is one of the things where like sometimes it can work and sometimes it doesn't work, and you're gonna have to find that out for yourself, right? And I think that's the whole point of this diagram. Publicity stunts are a separate thing. So Salesforce, I've been reading, Mark Benioff wrote this whole book on Salesforce, and Salesforce is, you know, this huge company that sells to enterprise, but they did a lot of publicity stunts, and he talks about them. He's like, yeah, we did a lot where we would like troll other people's conferences, and we'd like stage something outside, and we'd use that to like get press or what, like, you know, where they like went to their biggest competitors' conference and they announced something, right? And so basically any person that was writing about that big conference had to include something about Salesforce because Salesforce like had done something that was noteworthy, right? So publicity can be powerful, right? Like this is sort of like the Red Bull space jump. I don't know if you guys followed that, but it's a big publicity stunt, right? But it was like a big brand building exercise for Red Bull to be like, we're extreme, we go out and do these insane things. And people talk about it, right, because it generates word of mouth. Like the one other example was WePay. I really liked WePay's one. So WePay was this payment processor. They competed with PayPal, and PayPal was having a conference in San Francisco. And they had recently come under fire because there had been like 2 high-profile situations where somebody who had a PayPal account got their account frozen because it looked like suspicious activity or whatever. And like that's generally PayPal's like mode to like protect against fraud. That's like a natural thing that they do. It just so happened that it happened twice in like a few weeks. And but what WePay did is they put a bunch of like $100 bills and froze them in a block of ice. And then like underneath that block of ice, they printed like a poster that said like, WePay, we don't freeze, you know, we don't keep your money on ice, right? And they just rolled this block of ice around. Everyone's like, what is this like block of ice, $100 bills inside? And they read it and they're like, oh, you know, like it got written about. It was like all over a lot of different blogs, and like they got chased out of the, you know, the area, but like they were across the street on the sidewalk, right? You can't technically like tell them to go away from there. But like that stunt is something that people remember. Search engine marketing. So this is obviously a powerful strategy, right? Like what's great about Google and why Google prints so much money is because 13% of the internet clicks on ads, right? Most of us don't click on search engine ads because we know what we're looking for and then we look through the results. But obviously people do, right? Like this is why Google is able to give you Gmail and Google Docs and like, you know, Google Glass and like everything Android, everything that they do comes from, you know, search ads and display ads, but search ads is still worth more, right? And what's great about search ads is that you can capture intent, right? You know when somebody is looking for something that they're trying to do something, right? And you can capture them in that moment. So Airbnb later on used a lot with Google Ads because it was so customizable, right? You could be like, if you're searching for like accommodations in Paris, if you're searching Paris hotels, you're probably going to Paris. And we can probably put an ad in front of you that's like unique experience like in Paris, right? And that kind of sets you apart from everyone else who's just like cheapest hotel rates in Paris. You know, this is like, you know, a unique experience. Stay with the local, right? And so they use search engine marketing a tremendous amount to sort of capture new users. So again, social and display ads. This is an interesting one because I think social media has gotten really like sophisticated over the years, right? And so now we have newsfeed ads, and newsfeed ads are really powerful. When you look at advertising, it's Andrew Shen said something that like basically all marketing like eventually turns into a world of shitty click-through rates, right? Like the first banner ad on the internet was in like, I think we just celebrated the 20-year anniversary of the banner ad. So 1994, first banner ad. And it was like, it was on like Hot Wired, which was like Wired.com's, like, you know, it was like Wired's like website at the time, and Wired magazine. And it was a banner that said, would you click on the space above an article, ? You will. And it had a 50% click-through rate, right? Because no one had ever seen this before. What is this, you know? And, you know, now it's like 0.001%, right? Like it's crazy low click-through rates on the average banner. But if you sort of can find the right places where you're advertising, or if you're using social to target the right people, can still be a really powerful way to acquire new users, right? I think that Harry's is a razor blade company, and they've done a really good job of acquiring new users through Facebook ads, right? Because, you know, it's just shaving, and they can target men, they can target young men, and, you know, they've been able to create some innovative ads, right? So it's a channel. Search engine optimization, right? So RideJoy, part of the reason why RideJoy is still getting new users and still has usage today is because of the search engines. We don't do anything on the site, but what we did a long time ago is that our co-founder Randy like read up a bunch about SEO and like optimized the way that like our pages were set up, the sort of like URL, the like, you know, the slug. It was set up in such a way that it hooks into Google and Google crawls it, and we create new, you know, like that stuff was getting found by Google, and so we rise to the top of search engine results. And there's a whole platform, there's a whole set of people out there who are in the market of helping you do search engine optimization. It takes a long time, but again, it's like something that can be powerful for like evergreen content, right? Like there's some company called like, you know, there's these websites where it's like 100pushups.com, where they basically just list like a bunch of, like a sort of 10-week program for helping you do push-ups so that you can get to like doing 100 push-ups. It's like week 1, you know, 5 sets, and like set 1 is like, you know, 3 push-ups, and then 5 push-ups, and 3 push-ups, and then, but like you build up every week. And it just has a lot of search engine juice. It shows up at the top of like a lot of lists of like how to do 100 push-ups. Can you do 100? How do I train you 100 push-ups? And they're just at the top, and then they just have like some Google AdWords on the side, and I bet that guy makes so much money doing that. So can be powerful. Content marketing. So that's what I do a lot of today for my company at Percolate. Is I do a lot of content marketing, and so that's our blog, as well as like reports, white papers, research. Essentially, content marketing is kind of like 2 things, right? It's essentially this idea that you're creating content that people want, that your customers want to read, right? So if you are trying to target like health clinics and you're trying to sell them some kind of like right, the queuing system, right? Like you could talk about like how do you keep people entertained while they're like in the queue, or like how to deal with like rowdy people in your queue, or like how to like make, you know, process people as efficiently as possible. You write these articles that are informative, that are genuinely useful, and people will share them. Right? I think what's interesting about this is the idea that like sometimes it's hard to get people to promote your business, right? you tell your friend about your business, you're like, hey, I'm making this thing, it's really cool. They might share it once or twice online or tell some people about it. But if they do it day in and day out, it's gonna feel like they're shilling for you. Like, it just feels awkward, it feels uncomfortable. And maybe your customers might share one time or two times, but they're not gonna keep sharing. But when you create content that's really useful, then they'll keep sharing it because they know it's valuable for their friends or their peers, right? I make a lot of research reports for Percolate. I make, we just completed like this big survey where we like talked to 250 marketers and we like we got all this information about like what platforms are you on? Are you on Facebook? Are you on whatever? Like how much do you spend? How do you think mobile is important? We kind of did all this stuff, and we're gonna give that report away for free, which is like we spent like $2,500 to like get all the people to answer all the questions and do all this analysis and whatever. But we're gonna give it away for free because the people who want to read this report, the people who are senior marketers who care about what like their peers are doing, are the types of people we need to sell to. And so we give it away for free, but you have to give us your email, right? You tell us your name, your company, and your email. And then we email the report to you. And then now we have your email and we say like, hey, we know you're interested in, senior marketing trends in America. Like, one of the things that we talk to a lot of senior marketers about is, how to plan better, how to coordinate better, and then, and how to do that. Like one of our like best performing report is called the 50 most important charts on marketing and technology, right? And it's been downloaded like 3,000 times. 3,000 people have given us their email address, right? And that includes not just like anybody, but like people who are senior buyers, right? Like someone who heads like marketing for for McDonald's France gave us their email to like read this report, right? So if you make good materials, you can get a lot of growth that way. Email marketing. So email marketing is something that everybody should be doing, but it can be a way to reach more customers, right? Like I talked to a company yesterday in office hours, and they're doing, is he here today? He's doing, it's called, well, it used to be called Monstergram, but I guess you can't call it Monstergram anymore. It's called Monster something else. But they print your photos from Instagram, right? And he said that like we have a lot of traction, a lot of people like us, follow us, we get a lot of engagement, but we have these users and they don't come back, right? And I said, well, maybe what you should be doing is instead of print photo shouldn't be your home, like your call to action on your homepage. It should be like sign up for our newsletter on how to take better Instagram photos, right? And every week we'll send you like an email, right? Because people open their email. It's related to content marketing, right? Like we're gonna give you good content for free. But then at the bottom, you're like, hey, do you have any photos that you want to print? Like print them through us, right? And it's like a reminder. It's like you keep them in the loop. You're always kind of dripping them with more stuff, and then you remind them to buy your stuff, right? Similar with Groupon and with like companies like Thrillist or Daily Candy. They just, you get into this habit of receiving email, checking your email, looking at it, and then maybe buying something. Engineering as marketing. So this is an interesting one. This is like a new one where you're using engineering resources to build tools that acquire customers. So one of the best examples of this is HubSpot's marketing grader or website grader. I think this is essentially one of the best, it apparently over the last 5 years has acquired 2 million emails, right? And what it is essentially you put in your website and you HubSpot will go and parse a bunch of things and give you a report grade oh, your titles are too short, or it's not SEO friendly, or your images aren't the right resolution, so they're going to look blurry, blah, blah, blah. It gives you a grade, right? And you have to give them your website and your email address to get the grade, right? But anybody who's thinking about that kind of stuff is maybe the right customer for you because they care about marketing, they have a website that they are trying to do something with, and so they had to build engineering resources to create this thing that does this, right? And at Percolate, we're trying to do that too. We're trying to figure out ways of determining, like how many mentions happen for you or for your competitor, right? Like on Twitter, right? And be like, give us your handle and give us your competitor's handle, and we'll show you like how many mentions have happened in the last 6 months or 3 months. And like by doing that, we've now like identified you, right? Like you're a brand. We can like see how many Twitter followers you have. Are you big enough? And do you have your email? And so this is where you start to get creative to think about ways to acquire customers. Business development. So partnerships can be a powerful way to acquire users. Doing a good business development deal is not easy, right? It's often sounds better than it works out in reality. So and you really want someone who can sort of like think long term and really find a partner that's going to work for you, right? So in this case, we were thinking about that events company, right, at the music company, and maybe they were going to introduce us to the partners, and we were going to be able to make that work. And ultimately, I just don't think it was a good fit, right? It was hard to find. It was hard to see that this is going to really work. But when it does work, it can work extremely well. So it's like what you want to do is to find something where what you're doing is not competitive with what they're doing, but what you're doing is sort of complementary or additive to what they are doing. So yeah. 3 more here. Sales, right? Sales is pretty straightforward. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, some entrepreneurs, the folks who are like very tech oriented, they're maybe uncomfortable with selling, and they don't like to be sold, and thus, this is a challenge with sort of generalizing. This is a challenge with product and engineering focused people, is that they don't like ads. They think they don't want to be marketed to. They think they're not influenced by marketing, but of course they are. And then they won't admit that. And then so it's like a spiral here of challenges, and they're not comfortable selling. But sales can be a really powerful approach at Percolate. I was telling some people that like our product costs a lot, right? And it kind of blows my mind how much it costs. It costs $6,000 per license per month. For a business to use, and so that's a lot of money, right? That's $60,000. That's $6,000 a year, or sorry, $5,000 a month, so $60,000 a year, and that's for a single license. So that a license is like a brand in a market. So it might be like Red Bull in the U.S. versus Red Bull in the U.K. Right, so the UK needs to buy a separate license. But the truth is that we used to sell it for $10,000, and the product did less when we were doing it, selling it for $10,000, right? So like you have, and so the first thing we did when we built out our product was we built out a sales team, and then we built out an account team, and only now do we have a marketing team, right? So the marketing team was kind of late to the game, so the way we grew at the beginning was primarily through sales. Right, and so depending on the type of business you have, sometimes it's hard to reach them. Like you know who they are, and you have maybe their contact information. And the best thing to do is to be like, let's have a conversation. I'm going to talk, especially if your product is a little bit complicated. Right, if you're selling to a business, typically, if it's not like a simple process, there's going to be a sales cycle, and you're going to have to explain like what it is you do. Like you need to understand what they do. You need to be explain how what you do can work with them, and any objections that they have, you're going to be able to answer them. Affiliate programs. Affiliate programs can be an interesting approach. So this is kind of like what Dropbox did. So the way Dropbox grew in the early days was they tried a lot of things. They tried like display ads, they tried SEO, they tried like search engine marketing, and it was all costing too much to acquire users. And the thing that worked the best for them was what it's called a two-sided referral, which is essentially, as you guys probably know, like if you invite somebody and they sign up for Dropbox, you get 250 megs and they get 250 megs free, right, in your account. And especially if you had like a free account that was like 1 gig, that's a lot, right? That's a lot right there. So you're basically getting customers to like refer you. But there's other companies that do this, right? So like a lot of hosting companies do this, right? Where they do this where I can be an affiliate for my host, right? Like, because often if you run a website, people will ask you like, well, who do you use to run your website? I can tell you like Bluehost and use this code, and you can get like, 1 month free, and then I get like 15% off my bill, right? For as long as that person is a customer. And so then basically they've turned every customer into like their salespeople, right? Because they're giving you a they're giving you a deal. Like and it can be really powerful. It can be a lot of work to set up an affiliate program, and then you have to manage the affiliate program, but it can be also an effective strategy. And finally, the last one on this list is existing platforms. So this can be a really interesting thing, like especially with early platforms when you're new, you can kind of jump on it before anybody else does, or if you're the leader, you can be sort of like get ahead of the game. So with Zynga, right, Zynga really was able to ride the wave of the Facebook platform. As Facebook grew, they were able to grow at the same time, and they were able to like leverage the fact that Facebook was getting all these new users to be like, oh, and then we can just integrate it right there. Similarly with new platforms like Vine, right? Like I know that there's Lowe's is a company that makes like home improvement stuff in the United States, and they have this thing called Fix in 6. Vine is a 6-second platform, and they have these like really cool videos that are like Fix in 6, and it's like, oh, spilled something on wood, use walnuts to like rub out the stain, right? And it's just like, the milk spills and then, or the water spills, and then you rub the walnuts and then you wipe, and then it's good as new. I guess you have to wait overnight or something like that. But that's sort of like an opportunity where as Vine grows, they're going to be like, oh, what are the funny things to see on Vine? What are the cool brands to follow on Vine? And people are going to be like, Lowe's is doing this cool stuff. So you can sort of leverage that, right? Attach yourself to something that's already growing and getting bigger, and it can be a powerful way to grow. But the downside of that is like with Facebook, like there were like 2 apps, video apps that were like, it was like Social Cam and like Vidi that were both like doing a lot of like social video. And I think, it just like, you can see there was like a graph that basically showed like their growth, and it was like super high, and then it just like got turned off, and then it like dropped, right? And so that can be the downside of working with a platform. Cool, so I'm going to open it up because I think this is a lot of information. I think you all are probably thinking about your own companies and your own products and like how you're trying to acquire customers. So let's just open it up for some questions. Yeah. Yes. Well, right, so it depends on the company, right? For us, we found content marketing to be very effective. That's why we're spending a lot of time on it. But that's what, it's our major marketing channel right now. But it may not be effective for a different business, right? Yeah.
Doing content marketing. So you guys are like post your own content, and then track who's coming from a certain domain from that organization or not, or how do you?
Yeah. So okay, I'll just show you real quick, right? Like here's what we do. So we have this what we call the marketing library. So this is the Percolate website, and so these are our reports, right? So these are things that if you care about them, we're probably wanting to do something for you. So this one involved like interviews with agencies. So it's called Major Agency Marketing Trends. So we interviewed some agencies. So like if you work with an agency, like if you are familiar with this, you probably know about it. And we're talking about how like 2015 is coming up, and we interviewed like this VP of whatever at some company, and like read this report, right? And so what you do is, I put in my first name, I put in my last name, it asks for your company email, right? So it's like if you put Gmail, it'll block you. So like we want your work email and then your website, right? And so that's like one way to do this. And so it's going to send you the report, and then it's also just going to show up right here, right? So now you can read the report. Right, so this is the report, and yeah, so here it is, right? So this is our system, and then what we do is we'll go on Twitter and we'll promote this, right? So now we've got our social channel, and so yeah, so these are quotes, right? So this is a quote from from that report. If by 2015 you're a brand that's not on Instagram, you're a little behind. And if you click here, you're like, oh, what's that all about? And we're like, well, read our report, right? And now you can find out what the deal is, right? And then similarly, we have we'll do this on LinkedIn, and we'll even like pay to promote the tweet or the ad on LinkedIn so that it reaches more people. But at the end of the day, what we're driving them to is not like request a demo necessarily, but it's like download this report. And once we've gotten your email to download the report, then we can follow up and be like, do you have challenges? Can we schedule some time and talk to you, right? Yeah. To give them more information about it? Yeah. I think that's a good thing to test. We haven't had the opportunity to do a lot of A/B testing, but I think that's really important, is to do A/B testing on things like that. What we have done is we've launched reports that weren't doing so well, like they weren't getting a lot of downloads. Like we'd promote them, we'd tweet them, we'd show them off, and then like nobody would download them. And so we tried changing the title of the report. All we did was change the title of the report, and all of a sudden now it's getting downloads. So like definitely like testing is important, and I think that doing more testing can be really powerful. No questions? You're all getting tired. Come on. What's up? Well, I mean, the thing with affiliate marketing is that you can guarantee a good percentage, right? It's like, if you say like, okay, with every whatever, you're gonna get, you get a new customer, right? Like you only pay them when they give you a new customer. So you're basically spending, you have to decide what the cost to acquire a new customer is worth to you, right? And affiliate marketing means that you guarantee, like, you're only paying them when they give you a new customer. So I think in general, affiliate marketing is worth doing, but the question is, will it allow you grow fast enough, right? The second part about affiliate marketing that's hard is that you can't just like do more, like you can't just make people refer you more people. Whereas with ads, you can spend more money on ads. If it's working, you can just get even more people. Do you see how that's different? So it's more of a question of like, how fast do you want to grow? How effective do you think you can be with regular ads compared to your referrals? Are there people who are actually going to refer you business? Of a customer? For us at Percolate? So at Percolate, generally, I think we measure things on the lifetime value. You can basically measure it against churn, right? Like, so we have a SaaS product. It's like it's like you usually sign 1-year contracts, but the idea is we want you to renew, and I think something like 90% of our customers will renew, which means that that means that like on average, you'll have a turnover, like every 10 years, but that's kind of like a long cycle. So maybe you say like, you say the lifetime value is 2 years, right? And then you say that the cost to acquire is essentially like how much, maybe you say the cost to acquire is up to like 1 year's value, right? Because you know that all the subsequent years are like free money, right? So like it's 60 grand, and then you have to work your way backwards to figure out like how many leads do I need to get, and how many of those will turn into like conversations, how many of those will turn into like proposals, and how many of those will close a deal, and then you can figure out like how much does it cost, like how much are you willing to pay to acquire a new user. But it depends on your customer's data, right? It depends on what you're selling, how much they buy, how frequently they buy, and how often do they buy before they like stop buying anymore. And that's your, you know, customer lifetime value. Yeah. Referral software automation. I don't know the answer. Sorry. And especially with locally, I mean, I mean, I wouldn't imagine that it would be something that needs to be local. Right, right. I mean, you can use ClickBank, right? Why can't you use ClickBank? Because it's local. Oh, because it's so local. Yeah, well, that's an interesting startup idea right there. Like, you know, affiliate marketing for local service businesses. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, to be able to refer an individual. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. If somebody else knows, they should let Christine know. Yeah. Okay, we are going to do one more hot seat session. I want to see if there's any volunteers, or else maybe I will call on somebody. All right, we got a volunteer. Welcome. What's your name? Viv? Viv. All right, we're going to get a mic.
Hi, my name is Viv. Well, we are at the ideation stage.
Okay.
So we don't have a customer yet. Thinking back to your talks, we're probably gonna be the X for Y.
Okay.
So we're gonna be the kind of Airbnb, but for real estate.
For real estate.
Yeah. So
okay.
Airbnb focuses on short-term room sharing.
Yep.
Most of it traveling.
Yep.
What we want to do is we want to go long-term, you know, rentals.
Just
So
yeah.
technically, we try to replace agents,
Okay.
real estate agency.
So you'll work with the landlord.
Yeah. So what we try to do is create that platform where you connect renters and landlords directly,
Mm-hmm.
and we take care of creating profile for renters, so the landlords would know who that guy is.
Yeah.
And then once they sign up, we take care of the payments.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I think this is super valuable personally, because I think real estate is just a terribly inefficient system.
Again, this came at personal experience.
Yeah. But the challenge then becomes, how do you get landlords, right? Because they're not necessarily tech savvy people.
Yeah. So what we try to do is narrow down a focus in terms of who we want actually to be the landlords.
Okay.
So we try to get, because I'm an expat here, so we try to look for, there are a lot of expats in Malaysia who own a house.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to go through them first.
So they'd be the landlord?
Yep.
Okay, so they own a house, but then they also rent that house out.
Yeah. They're kind of tired of the real estate agency situation.
They don't like dealing with agents.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you got people who already have this, like, you know, they're tech savvy, or they're more
Yeah.
savvy, and then they don't like the system as it stands, so they're more receptive to
Yeah.
to what you got for them. So, how far along are you?
Well, I would say about 70% into the MVP.
Okay.
So we're trying to launch by January. The biggest problem that we're going to face is basically the law side of it.
Okay.
Meaning, what if the renter doesn't pay?
Yeah.
Which is the current problem.
Where does the renter doesn't pay?
Renter doesn't pay.
Like, are you on the hook, right? Like, you can't be on the hook for it.
Well, what we try to do is come up with a system that would create a late payment fee.
Okay.
So instead of just relying on the normal regulation of each country,
Yep.
we create our own system of terms and condition, just like a gym membership.
Yeah.
So if you go to a gym and if you don't pay,
Yeah.
technically they can sue you and you have to
Yeah.
pay them,
Yeah.
of course. So what we try to do is partner up with law firms
Okay.
to do that work for us.
Interesting. So you're going to create like a new kind of lease.
Yes.
Is that complicated? That seems a little complicated.
Yeah. So, yeah, a lot. So what if you ask me why someone else doesn't do it, is that complication of the regulations.
Yeah.
Basically, what we try to do is, as I said, come up with a lease of our own.
Yep.
So we need to check that with which we're doing it currently. Check that with lawyers. That
Yep.
is it doable or not?
Yeah. So what will the MVP do?
Basically, MVP is the matchmaking website where you as a renter tell us what you want, and we get the landlords.
Yep.
And then
Is it search? Is it like filter? Like do you post, do you create your own profile?
Yeah, basically we try to narrow down the search to area and condominiums only.
Okay.
So at the beginning, we're only going to focus on condominiums.
Okay, and you're going to focus in a particular area. So you have to pick like what area you're looking for.
So we choose, we don't have landlords yet, but we're going to filter those landlords. So we're not going to take any homes, but we're going to take the hot spots.
So you're going to go and find the hot condos, get them listed, and then you're going to get renters to look at it.
Exactly.
Are you going to how does this help the landlord though? What is the benefit to them?
Just the price-wise, if you're doing it with the real estate, you have to pay upfront. This is Malaysian law. You have to pay 1 month upfront to the agents.
Okay.
Okay. So what we try to do is we go commission-based.
Yeah.
So we say we find you the renter, we take care of your payments, home insurance, everything else. But we charge 9% commission per month.
Right, so you get paid up front. So you get paid that first month instead of having to give up that payment.
So every time the renter pays, we collect our 9%. So
Right.
you never pay up front.
Right,
And because that's our money,
Yeah.
we make sure to get it so you get your money.
right.
Yeah.
So they get they don't have to deal with collecting anymore. They don't have to hound somebody for money, and then they get money up front. Everyone likes to get paid right away, right? It just feels good.
Yeah. And one thing we try to do is, as I said, the late payments.
Mm-hmm.
So what we try to do is if you're a renter, you pay for the week late. Again, that we need to confirm with if we can actually do that to charge the renter, like say 5%, which is what credit card companies do.
Right.
So the landlord actually benefits from the late payments.
Then you
But
become
again,
like a credit card company on
Exactly.
top of.
I don't know if that's legal or not, but
Yeah.
we try to find out, yeah.
That's interesting. And what's your team look like?
2 people so far.
Yeah.
We're working with a developer, but we are looking for to hire a full-time developer as well.
Okay.
But a freelance developer is working on our MVP.
Yeah. So it's 2 founders plus the developer?
Developer, yes.
How did you guys, who's the other guy? The person?
The girl.
Girl,
My girlfriend.
excuse me. Okay,
Yeah.
so you guys already know each other,
so
yeah?
she, her background is interior design.
Okay.
My background is industrial design. So I'm designing the process of how it should work in terms of hooking up with law firms and insurance companies and finance companies. And then what she does is she kind of filters what kind of apartment we get,
Yeah.
because we want to be ready to move in apartment.
Yeah.
So if you ask us what's the difference, in Malaysia, the biggest property rental website is iProperty.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem with those websites is they focus so much on ads
Mm-hmm.
because they work with agents.
Right.
So there's tons of fake listing and
Yeah.
dated listing.
Yeah.
With us, because it's one-on-one,
Yeah.
we want to make sure everything.
How are you going to find the renters?
As I said, we're going to target on expats, which is our own network.
So not just the homeowners, but also the people who
The
rent.
people as well, yeah. My previous business was, my previous business, we had a like a mixed martial art gym. So we had a huge network of expats.
Okay.
So I already know a lot of them.
Yeah.
So we actually build a business out of their requests.
Yeah.
We're tired of dealing with agents. We want to find, so we did a survey, 92% of people wanted to meet landlord face to face.
Yeah.
So for us, it was like.
So maybe it's, instead of X or Y, it's almost the pivot, right? I think the pivot's a strong pitch, right? Because you're like, I already have a business, which one shows that you're like really capable, right? Like I already do something legit. And then through that, I like discover this other thing. And I just want to serve my people, you know? And so now we're doing this other thing, right? So cool. Thank you so much, Viv. That's really cool. All right, looks like tea time.
Unless you want to do one more.
I think we can do another one later.
Yeah.
We can
Okay. Let's take a break.
So we're going to talk about one more thing, and this one is a little bit more, I don't want to say informal, but it's not like there's going to be slides. It's not about slides. It's just about, I think, the idea of being a founder and doing a startup and sort of like the psychology and the things that you experience when you're going through it. So it's called Staying Sane in your doing your startup, because I think it's very, I mean, if you read a lot of stories about startups and you kind of hear about it, you'll hear about stories of people who work so hard and they're sort of like working 24/7 and all they're doing is like drinking Red Bull and like getting 3 hours of sleep every night, and it's just like crazy, right? And I think there's also people who like, you know, take out all their savings and like, you know, refinance their house so they can do this, and like, I think that I remember when I was starting my first companies that I talked to a lot of founders who would say things like, you know, my first company, I ran around with my head cut off and I, you know, did all this crazy stuff. My second company, like I was more sane and everything was like better. And I was like, why can't you do that in your first company, right? And I think some of it is preventable. Some of it is like you're gonna have to learn these lessons the hard way for yourself. But some of them you can sort of like, I don't want to say prevent, but I think there's an opportunity for you to like save yourself early on. So there's a couple things here, right? The first thing I think is really that you have to take care of your body when you're doing a company. Like people who are, especially people who are smart, we like to like think with our heads and we can rationalize almost anything. But what we have to remember is that our brain, and like it's a very natural feeling to feel that your brain is disconnected from your body, right? Like they're like separate things. Like my brain is up here, and then this is like my body, right? But like you kind of like, you know, separate them. But in reality, they're anything but separate, right? Like our brain, like our body feeds our brain. If you're not sleeping well, it's basically like impossible for you to be operating on your like on a top sort of like full performance from your brain, right? You can't possibly get full performance. Like if you slept 3 hours and they're like, now I want you to run as fast as possible. Of course you're not going to run as fast, right? But somehow we think we're going to get 100% out of our brain after sleeping for 3 hours, right? Like it doesn't make any sense. Like studies have shown that if you get like 6 hours of sleep a night for like 3 weeks in a row, you're basically operating like you're under the influence, like you've been drinking. Right? Like, would you drink while you're working? Like, if you wouldn't, then you can't, you have to do better in terms of sleep, right? So I think that's one thing. You know, another, one more thing I'll tell you about sleep, which I think is really interesting, was there was a study that was recently done with the Stanford basketball team, and they were trying to see, like, what if you get more sleep, can you, like, do better? And so they looked at the Stanford basketball team, they had them, like, measure how much sleep they're getting, on average it was about 6.5 hours per night, which is like pretty bad, right? Like not great. And they had these players, like they did tests like free throw shots and, you know, saw their percentage. And then they had everybody try to sleep as much as possible for like 3 weeks. And they had them sleep like they tried to sleep 10 hours a night. They ended up sleeping 8.5 hours a night. And like a month later, they retried them on the free throw shots. And their performance improved 13%. which doesn't sound that much, but when you're operating at such a high level, it's actually enough to trigger like a, performance enhancing drug like flag, right? They improved so much from sleeping more that it looked like they were taking like performance drugs, right? So that's kind of an amazing thought to think about. Like just sleeping more would actually put you on this like new level, right? And I think that with startups, there's like a period where you're like grinding and like all you have to do is like just like push away and like do a lot of work. But I think that's only, around half the time. The other half of the time is really about like making the best decision possible, right? As we've seen, like there's so many things to consider, questions to like consider and things to learn about and things to do to make the best move. And if you don't have, if you're not operating on a high level sort of intellectually, you're not going to be able to make that decision. Exercise, I think everyone knows that it's important to work out and to be active, but not enough people do it, right? And I used to be a gymnast, so it's maybe a little bit unfair because I'm just used to like being physically active a lot. But I don't think that it's too much to ask for people to spend like 15 minutes like doing a brisk walk in the morning, right? Or to do like some jumping jacks, some sit-ups, some push-ups like every morning, like 10, 15 minutes. Everyone has 10, 15 minutes. Nobody can say like, oh, I don't have time. I don't have 10 minutes to like do a little something, right? And I think that doing it in the morning, right when you get up is like the best time because you never have any like, you're never like waking up because you're like, oh, I have to do all these things, like something is due right now, like, so you usually have that time where you can get up and you can do something, and I highly recommend that everybody find an opportunity to do that. To go back to some of the things we talked about before with like, why does this happen? Why is it like people sort of subject themselves to these like really crazy hours and crazy amounts of sleep? And I think that this is my theory, is that it's about the fear, right? Like we talked a couple times about this, right? Like we fundraised because of the fear, right? We, didn't fire somebody because we were afraid that we would be able to hire somebody else again, right? Like there's a lot of scary parts about doing a startup, right? Like obviously there are a lot of things that are very exciting and very fun or very difficult, but there's also just a general kind of fear that's happening like all the time. What if this doesn't work? What if I look bad? What if my investors never fund me again? What if my, like parents don't like really like get at me and like, I told you shouldn't have done this, and there's a lot of uncertainty, right? There's like the fear of like bad things happening, but then there's just this uncertainty of like you don't know what's going to happen, and like everything keeps changing, and it's like uncomfortable and it's like awkward, and for most people that feeling is not natural, and they don't enjoy it, right? And this is what we discovered with our own team when we like had to let them go, is partly, if they were all fired up and they're all like, yeah, let's do something new, let's try different things, it'll be cool, and they were really enthusiastic about it, I think we could have maybe made something work with them. But they were obviously like uncomfortable, and they were like, didn't know where this was going, and they might start a company someday, but at that moment they were not ready to be founders again, which is basically what we were asking them to do. Because I think one of the things that founders, when you go and start your own company, what you have to be an expert at, a world-class person at, is in holding in that uncertainty, like in your heart, and being okay with like, tomorrow we might do something different, like, or next week we're gonna like learn something from one of our customers that's gonna make us have to throw out like months of work, right? Because we're going to change directions, we're going to do something different. Or we're going to get a cease and desist. Like, you just never know. It's just going to happen. It's going to, like, drop on your head, right? And you have to be okay with that, right? And I think that, like, accepting that, recognizing that that's the case, kind of, like, I think that some of the ways people try to not feel that is to do things like work really hard and work really late, because if you feel like, oh, at least I'm really tired, and at least I'm, like, busting my ass, then I must be doing the best that I can, right? And then they can like avoid that feeling for a little while. But that's like a false sense of security, because just because you're working really hard doesn't mean that you're doing the right thing. And I think doing the right thing is more important than just working hard. Like entrepreneurs, definitely, you have to work hard. There's no way around that. But it's not like working hard guarantees success, right? And I think that's frustrating for a lot of people. Like I grew up in a traditionally Asian culture where I had to work hard, and working hard in of itself was placed a premium. And it's like, if you work hard, you will get X, right? And with startups, sometimes you work hard and it doesn't work out the way you want. And that's really frustrating. But that's the reality of the situation, and you have to be able to be comfortable with that. Having one-on-ones with your co-founders, if you have a co-founder, if you decide to have a co-founder with your team for your company, I think it's really important to block out time to have like a one-on-one. Like for us, we didn't do it as much as I would have liked. We lived together and we worked together, so you kind of feel like, well, we're talking all the time. Why do we really need to like block out a special time to talk with each other? But the reason why one-on-one's important, I mean, like you should do one-on-ones with your team, and we started doing one-on-ones with our team, right? So I did a one-on-one with the community manager every week on Tuesday, where we would just be like, hey, what's going on? How are you feeling? What are you thinking about, right? And it's like a chance to like, for them, if they want to like, if they're like unhappy about something, they can bring it up. If they like have a question that they've been like wondering about, but they never had a chance to ask, this is the time to ask, right? If they like have an idea that they've been thinking about, they want to try, but they didn't feel like it was the right time, this is the chance for them to do that, right? Those one-on-ones weekly with your employees is really helpful. But you also need to do the same thing with your own founders, where you're like, hey, what's going on? Like, how do you feel? Like, and it's like, man, you always come into the office an hour late, and like it really like bugs me, right? That's never a thing that like there's a right time to say. Maybe maybe it's like right after they just come in, but you can't just grab them, and you can't just yell it across the room, right? So that's where that time to talk about stuff, or to be like, hey, I just really, we found out that one of my co-founders, Randy, was like feeling pretty burned out, and he'd been feeling pretty burned out for like a few months when we realized it, and we just had no idea, and the reason why he was feeling burned out was because he felt like he was working really hard, but he wasn't going to, like, we weren't going to hit the growth numbers we needed to be successful, and he just felt this sense of like helplessness, like I'm working so hard for something that's not going to work out. Like that's the worst feeling to have in the world, but we didn't identify that because we didn't have a one-on-one, and then finally we had the one-on-one, and he like almost started crying, like it was just so intense, right? And we should have been able to see that sooner. And so I think it's really important to have those one-on-ones and try to catch those things earlier and address those things. Another thing I think is important is to spend time with friends and to sort of like keep people updated with your company. I think one thing is that like a lot of startup founders will find that you become friends with other entrepreneurs, and like that's cool because they understand your business and they can give you ideas and they can give you good feedback. But then the struggle becomes this feeling of like you have to constantly be saying like, yeah, we're doing so great. Like we just signed this new customer. We just like built this new feature. It's super awesome. Like we're about to raise another round. And like, but then there's that pressure. And there's been a couple cases in the tech community of just founder depression and sort of leading to really unhappy things. And I think that that's a really real thing, and part of that is this feeling that you need to keep up the pretenses of success all the time, right? And so having friends who are outside of the startup scene, maybe that's easier for you because you feel like there's a small startup scene and so most of your friends aren't in startups. But like for me, like I had so many friends in that, and so like it was good because the person I was dating at the time was not in startups. So it was like they didn't care, like they don't need to hear about like what you're doing now. They want to talk about something else. They want to talk about where we're going for dinner, and all these other things. And like having people in your life where you can talk about non-startup things and they value you outside of how well your business is doing is like really validating, because it reminds you that you're still like a good person and like you're like a worthy human being, even if like your company isn't doing exactly what you want, right? And we kind of cut ourselves away from that in some ways when we like went through this pivot. I feel like we should have been more open. I think we should have just told people like, look, we're not working on this right now. We're trying to do some other ideas, but instead we kind of like put our heads down and just like didn't, like respond or didn't go out because we didn't want to like have to explain it to so many people that like we were embarrassed, right? But you have to like find those places where people can kind of, you can talk to them and you can be open with them about it. Yeah, I think, again, finding those opportunities to like try to use your product yourself or to really like stay engaged with your customers is important because it's easy to lose sight of that. It's easy to start to think about, hiring people and like new features and, getting an office and like all these random different things. And it's easy to forget like you're making something that serves a customer need, right? And spending time with those customers like regularly, I think is important, and it's like to sort of even just to regain that sense of empathy that you need to feel like what their problem is your problem, right? Because you're solving their problem, and you need to feel their problem as acutely and as sort of specifically as they do. Another thing I think that we did a little bit of, and I would have liked to continue to do more of, is to kind of keep a timeline, like both in terms of like a timeline of just like, oh yeah, this is when we got our office, and this is when we did whatever. I mean, like they make jokes about how like a startup is like your baby, but it is like your baby, and you're kind of like, this is when they walked, they were this old, and they like had this, and like I remember keeping track of some of those things, and it's like now, especially when I'm telling the story, like it's so good to have like some of that stuff to bring it back, right? Like take pictures of stuff, even the crappy office, like take that picture, keep that picture, remember what it was like when you were like nothing, and you're just sitting in a coffee shop, and you're talking about whatever, right? Like you have to kind of remind yourself of all this like stages that have come before to get to where you are, because you'll get to that point where you're like, God, I don't know what we're doing, and like everything's fucked up, and then you're like, wait, like remember when we didn't even have anything and no one knew who we were, or we didn't even have a customer, or we just got our first 100 like user, like all those stages along the way will help you, remind you, and they can also help educate people who are new to your company, right? As you grow, you'll bring new people on board, and to some degree, they'll wonder like, well, why do we do this, or why is it like that? And sometimes it's helpful to be able to like find ways to explain to them like, we've considered this, or here's what we, this is kind of separate from the timeline, but it's also sort of like company history, like helping. When you bring people on board, like to think about how to explain to them like why you're doing what you're doing. And sometimes it's helpful to be like, well, we started by doing this, but it didn't quite work, but then we noticed that like a few of these people were really interested in that, and we started working on that, and then that became that plus this, and now we're doing this, right? So to be able to like walk them through that.
My name is Francis. I'm the founder of Nexus Media Works groups.
Okay, what does that company do?
We focus very much into SEO and also SEM stuff, search engine optimization and search engine marketing stuff.
So how long have you been doing it?
Coming to 9.5 years.
Wow, so you started in 2005.
2005, 1st of June.
What got you started? How did you think about starting that?
Previously, I worked for Yahoo back in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Back then. So back to Malaysia and so on. Those days in Malaysia, search engine is one of the very early stage, very infancy stage.
Yep.
So when I look at the businesses, Malaysia majority of the businesses are small and medium enterprises, leveraging in terms of their product knowledge and so on, that they need to market their products overseas and beyond their own respective local markets.
Right.
So instead of using the traditional yellow pages and so on, it's really you opt to adapt to a new way of marketing.
Right, and so Malaysian companies that are trying to sell their products abroad, they needed a more effective marketing channel, and they didn't really know how to do search.
In fact, during that times, I'm creating the markets. I'm creating the opportunity. No one know about SEO stuff at all. It is basically doing a lot of education process and so on to educate them how to go about it, creating the belief, creating the trust and so on, building the trust for the first 10 customers, and they see the result. From there, word of mouth and so on, reputations built over years and so on, it create the markets.
Yeah, how long did it take to get those first 10 customers?
First 10 customers took me probably about a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
a
you were
lot
pretty
of hard works.
connected.
A lot of hard works. A lot of hard works. Virtually, you go to the office, meeting the client, cold calling, meet the client, try to convince them, explain to them in a very honest way,
Yeah.
trustworthy way, building the ethics, tell them how we're going to build, help them to markets and so on,
How
in
many
a very layman's way.
How many companies did you have to talk to get those 10?
Well, gosh, I think back then, so probably I make 100 of phone calls
Yeah.
to get my, really to get the first 10 appointments and so on. Well, not first 10 appointments, probably first 20 appointments.
Yeah.
So I have to do really the groundwork, build up the groundwork and so on, delivering more than the value that they are subscribing to.
Right. How big were those like contract values for the first?
Contract value is quite small. Back then, about 10 years back, we only charging roughly about 3,000 ringgit, which is about US dollar 1,000.
Yep.
For a period of 1 year.
You would work with them for 1 year. You would run ads on their behalf, and then for just $1,000 on top.
For SEO stuff.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
And then what about so you started with SEO, or you did SEO and SEM at the same time?
Yeah, back then, we don't do any SEM stuff.
Yeah.
That time is still very early stage that we are talking about Alta Vista, Lycos Asias, and iWants and so on.
Yeah.
So we don't run any ad during that times. Obviously, we only focus very much into SEO markets during
Okay.
that times.
Yeah, and so how long, it takes a while to get results with SEO, right? It doesn't happen overnight.
I think during that time is obviously in terms of looking into the algorithms and so on, building the contents and so on, is relatively speaking as compared to right now,
Yeah.
it's much easier.
That's,
Yeah.
again, the opportunity to be on a new platform, right?
Yeah,
New
yeah.
platform, you can get in front of people faster.
That's right. As compared to right now, we already no longer focus so much in terms of SEO stuff. We are more into chasing after building real content stuff. Algorithm base of SEO will not sustain you.
Yeah.
So the most important is develop great content.
So this is like the content marketing.
Delivering great creative marketings and so on.
And but that's how you do the SEO.
That's right,
You
that's
have
right.
to, do you employ writers?
We basically have some writers. We basically have teams to write contents and so on.
That's a pretty full development. I mean, so when did you start doing search engine marketing?
Search engine marketing is not too long ago. So we have done some search engine marketing back then was about a year plus ago to 2 years. Only recent days we start to be more aggressive to promote search engine marketing to the corporates.
Why did it take so long to do SEM?
I'm still very believe in terms of organic.
Yeah.
Reputations that you virtually have to be gained over time. You have to build trust.
Yeah.
The organic way. So you don't subscribe to so-called antibiotic to recover your health. You have to base on your own body system to recover.
Yeah.
So in terms of the SEM part, is virtually you pay the money tonight, tomorrow, you can
Quick
get
fix. Quick fix.
and
People
so
like
on.
quick fix.
So that's why when we look at search engine marketing, we look at things very objectively. What is the campaign? What is the ROI you want to get? What is the goal you want to achieve and so on? Is this gonna able to deliver the result that you require and so on? If no, why don't you use alternative solution to achieve your goal?
So you have a very strong view. So you try to bring that view to your clients. You're not just saying whatever you want me to do, I'll just do it for you.
No, we don't.
Yeah.
We inherit a very high code of ethics. So when we want to deliver the result. So if there is something is wrong, we don't hide under the carpet. We basically turn it out and find out what is the problems and so on. We build the trust. Client give us more and more value, more and more projects.
So where do you get your clients now?
Right now, we have a lot of small, medium enterprises, come to about 1,000.
Yeah.
we are moving into more corporate. We are getting big corporates like Sogo, largest Japanese department store. We done Telecom Malaysia, largest Telecom Malaysia, and so on.
Where did they come from? How did they hear about you?
They heard about us because of our reputation, about our informations in the markets and so on.
So you do content marketing for yourself, where
We
you
do.
talk about.
A lot of, sometimes it's because of the reputations, word of mouth, press releases, just like what you mentioned about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what is the average spend with your clients now?
Some of the clients obviously come into ad spend more than 10,000 in terms of per month spendings and so on.
Is that in ringgits?
In ringgits and
Yep.
so on. So some of them are adding more and more. Some of them starting from very small, like 2,000.
Yep.
Like Sogo, we start from very small. We want to build the trust.
They have a lot.
They have a lot of money. They have times and so on. You have to build the trust.
Right.
So that's what we are doing.
So you invest in the long term. And then what about with the SEO? You used to charge 1,000 or 3,000 ringgit.
Now, obviously, we charging come to about minimums about 7,000
Yep.
and above.
And it goes much higher.
Yeah, that's right.
Depending on how in depth you
That's
get.
right. That's
Yeah.
right. So we tell our clients, you don't come for us looking for ranking.
Yeah.
We don't deliver ranking.
What do you deliver?
We deliver the conversion. Because when you have conversion, your ranking will come. If you got ranking, you don't have conversion, it defeats the purpose.
Are you saying that Google tracks ranking or tracks conversion?
No, we obviously we do certain conversion tracking.
Yep.
Yeah, to ensure there is certain level of tracking that actually is converted from your organic channel.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But then what do you mean that the ranking will come when the organic? You mean that if it's well converting, it's a good site that will get other types of
Exactly.
traffic and
Exactly.
eventually.
Although you have a good ranking site, but you don't have any inquiries to come in, what is the purpose of having a site then?
Right,
Yeah.
right. So what are you trying to do now with your business?
Right now, obviously, we set up a digital consulting unit that is very much competing against big boys and so on.
Yeah.
Going forward is really doing more consultancies and so on. That's where we want investor. That's where we want investor that can bring us to the next level, bring us across the borders, bring us the connections and so on. Not virtually looking for the money.
Right.
Because we are basically self-sustainable.
Right.
We are looking for more than that.
So what do you think have been the hardest parts about, or what have been the hardest parts about building this business?
Well, I tell my guys and so on is I stay longer with the problem.
Yeah.
Obviously, the problem is there. I never give up. I stay longer with the problem.
What kind of problems are they?
Obviously, during the startup, sometimes you're so fed up because it's so new. The technology is so new, SEO so new. You virtually knock on 100 or 1,000 clients, you get rejection.
Yeah.
You got rejection. Their own choice is traditional media. Flip the newspaper, yellow pages directory, all the directories.
You had to
and so
change
on.
that mindset.
Yeah. So you have to educate them, change their mindsets and so on.
Yeah.
That's the frustration part. And more so because of during that time, Malaysia government, the government is not doing the promotional part. They should be spending more time to develop more into the internet rather than going into more the legacy system, ERP solution and so on.
Yeah.
The support wasn't given so much by governments.
I see. So that was also a challenge.
That's right.
If you're talking, so you've been obviously running your business for a long time, and what do you think your advice is to people who are planning to start their businesses now? What advice do you have?
Well, I will say I will never. You got nothing to lose. One thing is, I told myself it's very much. If the moments I've got my whole business fail, I can always go back to US to work.
Yeah.
So relatively speaking, you are there to try it. The moment you're willing to try it, you spend a bit more time to think about your ideas and so on. The most important, the more time you spend, doesn't mean you're gonna be successful, because the opportunity, the time to the markets as well.
It changes.
Yeah, it changes, especially in Asia market.
It changes fast.
Asia market is very different. It's quite unique.
Yeah.
So whatever in US doesn't mean it's gonna be applicable in Malaysia market. Just for example, let's say the car parkings and so on. You're gonna drive the car. Someone gonna get your car to ride your car and go for a parking to park for your car.
Right.
Your car is gone in Malaysia. It's gone. I'm gonna be very sure it's gone. It's not gonna work.
Yeah.
Some of the things just doesn't work.
Yeah.
That's
So that's good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I think right after lunch I did mention Jason was going to share with us how to stay sane and fit. At the same time, I'm not sure whether he shared that part yet. Now, what are the routines? Let's end this on a fun, more happy note, right?
Yeah.
What are the routines that you usually do to stay sane?
To stay sane. So I think that I can send out a link too with well, maybe I can pull it up online or something.
Yes, guys, do you think it should be a link or should Jason show us some moves? Oh, come on. Let's just...
Yeah, so...
what are reps? Any reps do you do? Any like...
Yeah, so there's two, I think, two workouts that I'll tell you about. First workout is pretty straightforward, like a lot of like weights, and so it's deadlift, bench press, squat. It's actually squat, bench press, deadlift, or squat, deadlift, bench press. So squat, on the rack, right? Like I don't know if you guys have gym memberships or like how many. The gym in our hotels is got a little bit of something going on, but it doesn't quite have all the right weights. But squat, you've got it overhead. You're back here, feet, and then you want to squat all the way down till you're parallel. Your thighs are parallel with the ground, and then you're kind of standing back up. And you want to do like a pretty heavy weight. Enough to get 5 or 8. I think I do 3 sets of 5. So heavy enough where like after 3 sets of 5, you're pretty tired. Then you move on to deadlift. Deadlift, you can sort of warm up. You can do like a lighter. You kind of keep adding 45 pounds until you get there on each side. So that's like 90 pounds until you get to the weight you want. And then you do one rep, one time of 3 sets of 5. And so with a deadlift, I do this kind of like mixed grip. And you can and so you start with the bar on the ground, and then you just try to keep the bar moving up in a straight line. So, and then you get to the top here. You try to lift not with your back, right? You keep your back straight, and you kind of stand up like this, and then you kind of like pull the bar into your thighs. And then the last one, bench press, pretty straightforward. You're lying on your back. I like to go with kind of a wide grip. And you have to get it so it touches your chest, right, and then your back. And again, 3 sets of 5. And I think that with the heavy weight, what it does is it's just like it's more efficient. It takes less time. You activate, the muscles in a pretty strong way. And takes, for me, it takes about 30 minutes and you can get out of the gym. And so, like, that's a pretty good strength routine. If you don't have access to weights or like that's not a priority for you, the other workout that I do is essentially it's called a Tabata. It's a double Tabata. So how many of you have heard of the Tabata? So it's a protocol. It's named after a Japanese researcher who did some work with the like a national speed skating team, and they're trying to figure out or cycling team, and they're trying to figure out a way to like keep like their endurance rate up without having to do a lot of work. And so it's essentially 8 cycles of 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off. So when you're doing the 20 seconds, you're going all out as hard as you can. And when you're on the 10 seconds, you rest. And so you do that, and so that's 4 minutes. And so I do a double Tabata where I do 4 minutes, and then I do like a 2-minute break, and then I do another 4 minutes. And you can do this anywhere because this is an exercise that just like, you can do it with anything. But what I do is I do a sprint, and then I do a burpees. So sprint is very simple, the buzzer, like you can get an app, it costs like nothing, like $1 where you can set the timers, and then it just goes, and then you run as far as you can for 20 seconds, and then, when it buzz stops, then you rest, you breathe, and then when it buzzes again, you run. And you do that for 8 rounds. It's very tiring. You're going to be like really exhausted or like right away. And then you rest for 2 minutes. And then you do, the second set is burpees. I like burpees because they're like a full body exercise. So they, like they work your arms, work your legs, they work your back a little bit. And so a burpee looks like this. It's like a combination of you like drop down to the floor, you do a push-up, and then you stand up, and then you jump. So it's sort of like a full motion, and you try to do as many burpees as you can. So burpee looks like that.
There you go.
And if you do that, that takes about 10 minutes, which everybody has 10 minutes. You might need another 15 minutes to like rest afterwards. Like sometimes I'm very tired after doing this, but really powerful way to like build up your muscle, but also get cardio, and it's pretty fast and like efficient and just gets it done. And if you want, you can switch it up and make your burpee, make your double Tabata, just like do like any kind of exercise, like do squat jumps for 20 seconds, then do like push-ups 20 seconds, and do sit-ups for 20 seconds. Just mix it up. If you do like 2 rounds of that, like you're going to be in pretty good. It's like a pretty efficient kind of way to get things done.
So how often do you do the burpees, the Tabatas, and how often do you do the strength?
I mean, I've been mixing it up. So I've been training to run the New York City Marathon. So I just ran it in the weekend before I came here. Actually, it was actually really, really, really cold. So I kind of froze up because I was training all summer and I didn't have the proper gear. And I got to mile 20 and I was like frozen. And I was gonna try to walk the next 6 miles, but I thought I was gonna catch pneumonia. And I didn't want to miss this, so I had to step off. But I've been doing a lot of running. But if I wasn't running as much, I would probably do the strength like twice a week, and then maybe another 2 days a week of the burpee Tabata stuff.
Any particular time, morning, evening?
I do it in the morning just because it's easier to get it done in the morning, and then maybe go for a run or 2. So mix it up, so 6 days of a workout a week. I like to work out almost every day. It just feels better. I feel better, and then once you get in a rhythm of it, a routine of it, like exercise is also an appetite suppression, so it's like you can eat a light, you eat even a lighter breakfast. I usually work out before I eat anything. So like wake up, I'm on an empty stomach, I work out. That also sort of triggers fat burning because like your body is already in a no carb state because you haven't had any carbs for like 10 hours, and then you work out, and then you're just basically burning fat.
Sounds like I can faint.
I think when you first start and you haven't been doing it for a while, it can feel a little weird, but you like get into it. Once you get into the rhythm, then you're like, you feel okay about it. Like I'll do like a pretty hard workout without eating anything, and like your body has what it takes to get it done.
So what's the limit for each person, right, before they get to the point of a little bit high? I should stop right now. How do we know that point? Because I don't want to overwork.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think that in general, I usually feel that most people don't work hard enough. I think if you are feeling a little bit faint, you should probably just take a step back. Like even at all, you should probably just like take a rest. I challenge you because I mean I think maybe like it's easy. It's if you jump right into something and go too hard, yeah, you could hurt yourself. But like if you build up to it, you're gonna be fine. Yeah.
Okay. Any questions on how to stay fit? Anybody have any ideas on how to create an app on how to stay fit? There's your model right here. Any other questions? No? So, yeah, I think we thank you for coming. I think it was a... Sorry? Yes, please.
When you first started your startup, how young is your staff?
What? Was my team? The other people on my team?
Yeah.
So let's see. I mean, we were all pretty young. So I started. I was like 24, 25. So 2 of us were 25. 1 of us was 24. Randy was a year younger than us. We hired a designer. Our designer was the oldest person on the team. He was 28. Our community manager was like a year out of school, so she was like 23 or 24. We hired our designer was same age as us, so like 25, eventually 26. Other iOS engineer, 26, 25, yeah.
How do you retain your staff as compared to some of them? So many complications in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think they were there with us so long that we could really say, like, yeah, we retained them for so long, you know, but I think that people want to work for companies where they feel that their work is being valued, where they feel like they have opportunities to grow, and where you know, they have sort of like some control, some autonomy over what they're doing, right? If they can feel those things and they like the people they work with, if they can do all those things, it's not about the money, right? Like, all of you know that, like, it's not like, a lot of you are thinking about quitting to do your own startup. You're going to get paid way less for a pretty long time, and like, there's a hope that there's a payout to that, but the money isn't really what motivates you on a day-to-day. It's to be able to do something that you feel is meaningful and have control over your work. And so I think those are some of the same things that you want to offer your staff to keep them.
Okay, thank you very much. So again, we thank you for coming all the way to Cyberjaya to learn from the man, Jason. Look out for more workshops. Look out for more workshops. We usually post it on our website, but we also push it on Facebook. I believe you guys will get more on Facebook. All right, just try to get more traction on Facebook and website as well. So again, thank you very much. We're very excited to have you here. Thank you for being a part of the community, and hope to see you again soon. Thank you all.